Okay, we're ready to get started. Audio's on. Just waiting for the video to start. Okay. So we were in recess yesterday, resuming our extended study session now. The next topic on the agenda is facility planning, and we have this set until 10:30.
All right, so glad to be back here today to discuss and share with you information about really facility planning. Want to do a review today of the 2022 levy measure that just passed and provide updates related to efforts that are currently underway and some additional considerations that are currently being discussed as we think about moving those projects forward and providing the capacity that was stated within that levy. As we think about moving ahead with the bond measure in 2024, there's a couple of terms that, and I put this in the situation recommendation in board docs. I used the term recovery. Lake Washington School District has passed one bond measure in the last 11 years. And so when I think about where we would have been had our bond program been successful over that period of time, we'd be in a much different place in terms of the actual physical space that students have to learn across our district, in all regions of our district. And so that's why I use the term recovery, because it isn't just about future planning, it's really about planning for students that are here today. Some of that is overcrowded schools, but that's also the usage of current portable classrooms. And when we think about what a portable classroom means to a school, and when you start adding 4, 6, 8, 11 portables on a campus, you're adding wings of buildings to your campus without that being really connected to the physical infrastructure. School sites weren't designed to have that many additional classrooms when you think about the provision of a gymnasium, the provision of a cafeteria, administrative space, playground. I mean, all of those things are impacted when we continue to use portable classrooms as the strategy to accommodate growth. And so that's why I use the term recovery. The next term I used in the situation recommendation is new. We do have a need for new student space across the school district, and that is new schools located in very targeted areas, knowing that we have density that's currently being built out, and we know there's future density that we can expect in the years to come. And then the last term I used in the situation recommendation was replace. We currently have what we would consider 5 aging schools that do not meet our educational specification. And so in that, evaluating those school sites and those campuses to determine the best method to update those schools, be it remodel or replace. As you know, the typical evaluation process really has led us to a replace profile for our school sites, just given everything that's involved with a remodel. And so those are the terms that I use. Those aren't the typical terms we've used, but just trying to be really specific about what the work is as we move ahead. And so excited about really this long-term planning as we think about how do we prepare this school district for 50 and 75 years in the future, knowing that there will be ongoing and continued growth across Lake Washington. And so we invited our student from Blackwell Elementary back to represent us today. And so we appreciate our success being directly linked to her smile that was shown across our community during the levy campaign. She did a tremendous job, and we're glad to have her back as well. And so today, a couple of pieces, some really large buckets, if you will. Really a review of the Building Excellence Plan, because the levy in 2022 is just one step in the overall program as we think about that was really about critical capacity needs. So student space needs that are imminent, if you will. Next is just an update of the overall construction levy As you know, there are some unique features of the 2022 levy that we're still considering and building out when we think of the elementary capacity, the high school capacity, which we're having to be creative with. And then kind of that forward-facing, what are we thinking about in terms of the bond? What data do we have to help us to continue to inform our thinking around the bond measure? And then how do we make those determinations moving forward around what would be on a bond measure? And so here you can see session outcomes, just wanting to make sure that the board understands current and future efforts related to the implementation of the Building Excellence Plan. The Building Excellence Plan, as a reminder, is really two components. It's a construction plan, but it's also a funding plan that we really married together as we think about how we move capacity forward here in the district. Next, the board understands the multiple variables related to decisions about future funding measures, because as you know, nothing is simple, nothing is easy, and our data is always changing. And so we want to be responsive to that so that we're making the best decisions we can with the data that we have available to us. And finally, that the board provides considerations related to the timing of funding measures. And so Barbara has a slide deck from D.A. Davidson that we'll walk through to really provide some data around timing of bond measures. And as we think about 2024, there's some unique aspects about that year and the types of elections that will occur during that year. So want to have those discussions as well.
So I'm just wondering if you put the PowerPoints up on board docs.
Yes, we can do that.
Yes, we will. Yep. Let's see, I'll do it in just a couple minutes.
That's fine.
Yep. And then, as always, want to ground us in, like, how does this work move forward? And really, when we think about the values that we aspire to, these are some of the values as I think about our work related to facility, management, capacity development. It always has to be aligned with our mission and vision, because that really is the foundation of our work, ensuring students have full access to the array of services and supports so that they can reach the high expectations that we have for them of graduation and being future ready. Ensuring that along with that comes a high quality education for every student across Lake Washington. And the concept that we are part of a larger community, and that as we develop excellent schools, that truly is part of an excellent community. And you really can't have one without the other. And each makes the other stronger. And so that's a value that I know the board has expressed over time. The effective use of community funding to meet the needs of our students, and I use the term effective because when I think about all of the different ways, like we could just maintain our standard profile of schools and just continue to do that. I'm not sure that would meet the definition of effective any longer. And so being really thoughtful about how we use the funding that we receive to meet the needs of our students, and in this regard, in terms of the capacity in school development. Effective use of space. And when I think about that, we have current space across the district. How are we thinking about those in new and creative ways? Which kind of goes to that next idea of partnerships, really to develop innovative and unique solutions to a problem that not many school districts have faced given our unique variables here across the district. And finally, transparency through these processes, because these are not low dollar items that we're talking about, and so we are seeking to partner with our community, and we want to be transparent in the funding that we're seeking, how those funds are used to ensure that they feel that there's transparency and an understanding in that. And so a few considerations as we think about today. The district does strive for excellence in accomplishing high goals and expectations for student programming and outcomes. Every time we talk about board policy, yesterday I could point to many times during the day that this was true. The expectations of the board is that we have the highest of expectations for our students, our staff, our schools, all in service of our students achieving excellence. Next, the district has ongoing maintenance and improvement opportunities in capital facilities, technology to support excellence and outcomes for students. So when we think about everything we're trying to accomplish in our facilities, that we're able to do that effectively. And we also know that we're rapidly growing. We also know that we just had an experience, well, across the globe. The pandemic has changed things. And we don't know exactly what that change means for the long term of public schools, but we know that there's been an impact. We also know that we've learned some skills along the way that could also help inform what education looks like for students. So all of that kind of combined helps us to consider our facility needs. With that, I will hand it over to Associate Superintendent Barbara Posthumus. I think most of you, or all of you know, Executive Director of Support Services, Brian Buck. He's here to partner with us in the presentation today. So, Barbara, I'll hand it to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're excited to have Brian. Forgot about the mic.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you. We're excited to be here and have Brian here to talk about all the great work that he and his team have been doing, planning for our levy and our continued building excellence plan. So want to remind everyone first of what our building excellence plan is. We spent 8 months prior to the levy, the February election, planning and determining what would be on the election, and part of that, and that was just, as John said, phase one of our building excellence plan. So we have a 3-phase plan. We passed the 2022 construction levy. That was $295 million. Step 2 would be a potential bond in 2024. About $971 million, and that funds continued new schools, but also begins to fund those aging schools that Dr. Holman mentioned. And then step 3 would be a renewal of the capital construction levy in 2028 for approximately $705 million. And again, that would continue to address capacity needs and address aging facilities. So this slide shows all of the identified projects to accommodate both our growth, our past growth, future expected growth, and our aging facilities. So I won't go through every project on here. We'll talk about the different phases as Brian goes through the presentation, but this just shows you kind of the cumulative need in our district in order to house students and deal with our aging schools. So it's about $1.9 million, $1,900 million, or 1.9. And so I will turn it over to Brian, and Brian's going to go over kind of what, now that our levy passed, what we've been doing as far as getting ready for the projects on that levy. And before, I'll just talk about the budget. The $295 million is made up. We've got 8 projects, because I've got 5 line items, but we've got 3 additions at 3 middle schools, Finn Hill, Kirkland, and Redmond. We've got a new elementary school on the Redmond Elementary campus. We have additional high school capacity both on the east side and west side. And the $295 million budget includes, for every time we put projects together, we know there's construction inflation. We know we need to build in contingency for unforeseen things such as concrete strikes would be one example of that. And then we also have property funds built in. So that is the initial planning for budgets. We know once we get closer, and Brian will talk more about that, once we get closer to the design process, those budgets will be refined over time. So, Brian, I will turn it over to you. Yep.
Thank you. So as we look at the planning and design process, for the middle school additions, we've done feasibility studies. We're pursuing the GCCM delivery model, which is similar to some of the projects we had in the 2016 bond. We've selected our architect, and we're starting on pre-design services at the middle schools. For the new elementary school on the Redmond campus, we've done feasibility studies, and at this point in time, we're looking at what delivery method we're going to choose. This is either design, bid, build, or the GCCM method, or there's now a progressive design build option as well as an alternative delivery model. At the high school capacity on the east side, we've gone through feasibility of additions and also secondary capacity on Site 59. We've selected an architect for the Site 59 pre-design, and we're starting to begin pre-design services there. On the west side, we're really at site selection review at this point. And then from a programmatic standpoint, we're looking at the cash flow.
Remind me what Site 59 is?
Sorry, this is in Sammamish. It's a vacant, our undeveloped site. Yeah, it's not on there. No, it's
Okay.
underdeveloped.
We've got some slides.
Yeah, we got more.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
apologize. Okay. All right, so on the middle school additions, again, we've done feasibility for each. This is at Finn Hill Middle School, Kirkland Middle School, and Redmond Middle School. We've had preliminary concept design meetings both in December and February. And like I mentioned, we're starting our pre-design services for those projects with a targeted opening date for fall 2024. This is from our feasibility study. Our initial concept design at Finn Hill Middle School is a single-story addition of 8 classrooms to house up to 200 students. This addition is on the north side of Finn Hill, and it just expands another classroom wing to the north. For Kirkland Middle School, our initial concept design is a 2-story addition of 8 classrooms for a capacity of 200 students. And this adjoins an existing or is adjacent in connection to an existing 2-story classroom wing. And then for Redmond Middle School, it's again a 2-story addition for 8 classrooms, up to 200 students for added capacity. And you can see there it's kind of near, but kind of jets out near the library.
Brian, can you talk through the process to even get to this point in terms of your team's work, engagement, who was involved in this? How did we land on these as the selected concept designs?
Yeah, so we go with our feasibility study. Our architects looked at all the site constraints and code constraints related to each site. And then they provided us options of what is possible on the site in total. And then we kind of narrowed down what our options are for this classroom space. So as you can say, we're on the Redmond Middle site there. They've identified other areas that could also in the future be turned into classrooms inside the existing building. They've identified adjacent potential core expansions in the future, so that we're looking broadly through all of the potential growth at a school before we decide where to put the classroom addition. So this classroom addition is 8 classrooms, but we've also looked at all the other potential additions that could happen at that school. So we're not eliminating future core expansion or other growth.
And then who's involved?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, so our team goes through that process, and then we come together with our middle school leaders, the principal and administration at Redmond Middle and all the other middle schools, along with the directors of school support and Dale and our team here.
I had a quick question. I was looking at the capacity projections handout you guys gave, and so I was wondering how's the decision made about which school these additions are added to, since it looks like there's an addition for Kirkland, correct? And just looking at the numbers, I was unsure about why that school was chosen and what's the process behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give one answer, and Barbara may give an exact opposite answer, but hopefully not. When we look at the Kirkland area, we know that there's 2 middle schools that are drawing and then feeding into Lake Washington High School. So currently, Rose Hill Middle School is projected to be at or over capacity quite substantially. We've had to add portables already to that campus. And we also know that, unfortunately, we have work to do with the boundaries in that overall area to make sure that there's enough student capacity in the overall area. Doing an addition at Rose Hill when Kirkland is the size it is today doesn't make great programmatic sense. And so adding to Kirkland and then shifting some of the population to that school so that there's a little bit more balance across both schools, knowing that they both feed into Lake Washington High School, is kind of the long-term thinking around that.
Yeah, I think John covered it, and again, we're not going through every middle school on that list. We're going to get to this later in the presentation, but some of our other schools on there, such as Kamaic and Evergreen, they're part of our aging facilities, and so those capacities will be updated once those aging facilities get addressed. And again, it's the goal to try to get our smaller middle schools up to kind of our standard capacity of around 900. So.
Okay. So our new elementary on the Redmond Elementary campus. On the right, you can see the existing school site. Redmond in the downtown area continues to grow with the expectation of up to 600 new students in just the downtown area in the next 3 years. What we're looking at is the underdeveloped portion of land there between Old Redmond Schoolhouse and the Redmond Elementary campus. So we, in our feasibility study, this is just a concept design that shows a separate structure, 2 schools on one site. We've had preliminary design meetings in December. And to be determined is an architect and engineering selection with pre-designed services. Targeted opening on this is fall 2025. So decisions and again, development of academic programming and the design of this school. Other current considerations are the grade configurations within each campus, and its opportunities for shared common space between the campuses. Next step is to really dig in with the stakeholder engagement during our design process.
So we're talking about 2 separate elementaries on the adjacent property, correct? As opposed to one being built and replacing the other. Okay, I just want to make sure I had it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, because currently and that was a couple slides previous to this, the number of students that are going to grow in the Redmond Elementary boundary really requires about 20 additional class. Right.
I'm not questioning you, I just want to make sure I had understood it correctly. When we redid Juanita, we had a building here that then we tore down the
Correct.
other one, so I wanted to make sure.
Correct.
Thank you.
I just want to add, we mentioned stakeholder engagement during the design process on this slide, but that is really going to be happening for all of our projects. And so that is part of the process when we design and build all of our schools, is to engage, staff members, community, and get feedback all the way during the process.
And so, sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my head around two elementaries, because effectively it's one massive elementary, but you've got two principals and two student bodies that you can't swap back and forth between, is that?
So the having an elementary school of 1,200 feasible. Thinking about how you run that many students through if you just take lunch alone. Trying to feasibly do that well is difficult. What we know is it's one boundary of elementary students. Siri and I talked about this. So it's like, how do you ensure that there's the development of relationship across the grade bands? How do you continue to ensure that students in all grade bands are familiar with and partnering with each other, engaging with one another, so that as they're transitioning through, it isn't that there's a lack of experience. Now, how we do that, that's in that really programmatic academic design around, how are we ensuring that the programs such as like the Little Buddies program, that, the youngers are continuing to, work with a classroom that's with older students, those types of things. Is it intentionally designing recess so that there's opportunities? Is it, there's all sorts of ways to make sure that students are continuing to interact with one another. And at the end of the day, we will have two, if you will, elementary schools worth of students on the campus. And so thinking of that in some discrete ways is also important for the management of the campus, but there's also opportunity to make sure that there's community continuing to be built.
So with it, I know there was discussion of partially considering a K2 and a 3-5. And I remember holding the discussion that my concerns with that, when you separate that out in community and transitions, and preferring to see that we maintain a K5 and a K5 really running as two separate schools. So that's the piece that I think has some discussion piece in which to decide, because I do think those do have implications in regards to the community and that piece of the component that you're speaking to. The other question that I would have, and this would be on all of these, is as we do this and we build additions, I'm assuming there is connections with the city in regards to the impacts that are occurring within that area. I think of traffic impacts potentially of, I just know that those are some of the issues as we get more crowded within our cities, and this happens, that those come up more often. So hoping that that is engaging early in which to be able to mitigate those things as soon as possible.
We have regular collaboration meetings with our cities, and Brian and his capital projects team are meeting on a regular basis as each project is designed. We are, though, as we become more urbanized, we're continuing to also have those conversations about, as we build more urban design schools, the availability for parking or traffic loops may be limited. And so how do we, again, continue to let our communities know about how their zoning codes and things like that impact our construction, so.
Absolutely, and being able to hold those conversations now with even communities so that they're aware of sort of those things, and that they have what the vision is and the goal is in doing so, and how it will be addressed. So that's great.
And so one more, or just basic question. So the premise is that two campuses worth of facilities on the same site. So they have their own field, they have their own gym, they have their own dining facilities. Is that accurate?
So Brian can give you more detail around the specific facilities. We were just talking the other day around lunch.
Okay.
So should we build a lunchroom in the?
Right.
I said, I thought, pretty good idea, just given, you can't run 1,200 students through a current
No,
cafeteria without running 6 lunches. And that's not, I mean, you're starting lunch at, 30 minutes after the kids get there. There isn't space for 2 separate, like, playgrounds.
Right.
And so you're gonna have to figure out how do students use it well.
Right.
Together.
and, okay, so that was what I kind of assumed. And my last question is just a clarification about something I thought you said. It's the same boundary, so this is a shared feeder pattern?
Correct. It's the
Okay.
red L boundary.
Wow, okay. Creative, thank you.
If I might, the core spaces, as you speak to, lunchrooms, gyms, all the above, they have to be doubled.
Yeah.
We know that this is an issue. We've seen it consistently as we've built additions. There is no reason we should underbuild that.
And we
Go up
also-
5 floors.
Yeah, and we also want to utilize the space we have. For example, in Old Redmond Schoolhouse, there is gym space there already. So we want to make sure we're utilizing the assets we have already too. So, but all of that will be part of the design and planning and stakeholder engagement process.
And so correct me if I remember, the agreement with the city of Redmond was also around that gym space and access to it. Is that only after school hours?
The current agreement right now with the city is they are leasing that. That is exclusively theirs as part of their lease. I can't speak today on
Right.
what hours they're using it. I don't have that information today.
So knowing space is always an issue. The more we can think about how we continue to provide those opportunities for our community outside would be highly valuable.
Yeah.
And one question, I would assume, just given the geographics of it, with Redmond L, you've got the access to it on a side street, if you will, whereas the new construction would have to end up being on, I guess, what's that, 166th? And that's a major flow-through, as I recall. And that's going to be a bear of a traffic snarl, I would assume.
Yes, and it's, well.
I just want to make sure I was
It's
visualizing.
similar to, you drive through Redmond, and there are multiple high-rise projects being worked on right now. It'd have to be a similar profile to that.
Okay.
Brian, I don't know if you have any additional thinking around what does, building a school on a site where it's really thinking about urbanized development.
Right.
And how we mitigate some of the impacts, knowing that we can't mitigate every impact of
No,
traffic
no,
and things like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So we'll look at siting the building in the most optimal spot, not only for during construction, but then afterwards. And we are going to have to add parking and loop lengths, but it's really an opportunity for us to look at that whole campus and determine how to best utilize that whole campus, given that there's 3 buildings there. Okay. So moving on to high school capacity on the east side. So we've done feasibility of additions at Redmond High School, as well as feasibility of a new secondary building on Site 59, which is in Sammamish. So this table kind of outlines some advantages and disadvantages and cost schedule impact for each. As it relates to the additions, it does align current enrollment projections with capacity needs at those schools. Some disadvantages is it increases permanent capacity beyond what we're currently targeting with our educational specifications, which is around 1,800 to 2,000 students. Building a 5th comprehensive high school in the future will reduce enrollment at these high schools. And there's no expansion for course or no course space expansions planned currently with these additions. And then as it relates to costs, the cost per square foot for an addition is usually much higher just because of the economies of scale and connections to buildings. So then as it relates to Site 59, which is in Sammamish, It does add a flexible facility to address the immediate need of capacity in secondary. It provides for future capacity needs after the comprehensive high school would open. And it's an opportunity for us to be innovative and design in an urban setting. Disadvantages, although I'm not sure it's a disadvantage, is really it's collaborating with our community on a short-term, long-term option for this site, because it'll serve immediate needs at Redmond and Eastlake, but then can be used for other programming after the 5th comprehensive high school is built. And again, the cost per square foot, usually there's more economies of scale with a larger building.
And when we think about it, this is like getting that last piece of a Rubik's Cube on the right side of the cube. The knowing that down the road, there's the 5th comprehensive high school, and how do we mitigate impact on our high school students in the short term, while also overlaying a long-term plan and wanting to use our resources well, effectively, in the long term. And so that's the struggle we're working through right now, is because for us, additions at our high schools, they don't make sense, programmatically right now, but they also particularly don't make sense with a 5th comprehensive high school coming online. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons why additions don't meet the target, because we then are essentially assuming we're okay with 2,500 student high schools. And I think all of us have articulated that that's not where we want to go. Yet, if that's the case and we're not doing additions, then we have to have some relief in the short term, because short term really is, if bond passes in '24, then we're building a 5th comprehensive high school in the short term after that. So, we're talking about a handful of years that we need capacity relief for our east side high schools. So those are just the pieces we're working through right now. The term flexible, flexible facility is a term that we've started using, just knowing that if it were used for high school capacity today, that it then also generates an opportunity to use it for a different grade band in the future.
And no, Site 59 is right up between Eastlake High School and Eastside Catholic, correct? That's the location of
Yes.
it. And the CW Extension Campus,
Correct.
right?
We've got a picture of it further on the.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Correct, yep.
Yeah.
It's right across the street, yep.
Yeah.
So the other piece, and I know that you'll get to it as well, but to think about is Inglewood is also a significantly large middle school at this point in time. And with the potential for town center at the Sammamish location to start going under development, that will have other impacts that occur. So that flexible concept is a really useful option to be able to utilize.
So it gives us the opportunity in the future to think about what are the space needs in Sammamish. Is it our first foray into a K-8 model, knowing that that provides relief at elementary and middle school, knowing that it's just difficult to busing kids off of Sammamish doesn't make sense for a whole bunch of reasons. Primarily just the time it takes to get off the hill, and so. Yeah, that's one of the things we've talked about. We also know we'll need additional elementary space. So again, it gives us opportunity to make different decisions in the future based on what students are there and what projections look like then.
Okay, so we did feasibility studies at both high schools and on Site 59. Had some preliminary concept design meetings in December. We do have an architect selected for Site 59, and they're going through and starting pre-design on that site Targeted opening is fall 2025. This is the feasibility concept at Redmond High School. It's a two-story addition. You can see it's in the north side of the campus. It's 12 classrooms. It's capacity for up to 300 students. This is a very intriguing design. It creates a courtyard and also daylighting. It provides daylighting to the new wing, if you will. And so this is the, at least our current concept, initial concept for an addition at Redmond High School. Correct, yep. Currently, the wings, they would attach in two spots to do different classroom wings, yeah.
And that is slightly different than what the prior, where Building A was to be built, which would have been on the south end,
Yeah,
correct?
to
Yeah.
continue further, yep. For Eastlake, we're fairly limited. It would be a two-story addition for 12 classrooms for up to 300 students. These are just extensions on each side of a current addition at Eastlake. And so there's room there to add two additional two-story wings there at the end.
Why does it say detention?
There's probably stormwater detention there, yeah.
We probably cut some.
Yeah.
In the context of a school. it's-
Yeah. There's not- Sorry, yeah, we clipped a bigger pic in there. Yeah, so there's stormwater detention over there, yeah.
The attorney would think of that.
And then for Site 59, on the top right, you can see there's two parcels. It's 15 and a half acres. It's adjacent to 228th in front of Eastside Catholic, which is between Eastlake High School and Skyline High School. It is within the city of Sammamish's town center plan, and there are limitations related to wetlands. This concept design was actually performed in 2017, and you can see on the left the wetlands in the buffer area. The larger area is the buffer, and then the smaller is the wetlands itself.
Can you mention the two schools in the concept?
Sure, yeah, there's two schools in this concept design, an elementary and a potential choice high school. So, and some core space there. So this is just an initial feasibility design, and we're starting to talk with the city of Sammamish, preliminary talks with the city of Sammamish about the development.
So as you're looking at, how many students are you expecting to be able to have on Site 59, regardless of the building?
This
Like
is
a
up to
range.
600.
Well, so the 2022 levy funds capacity for 600 students. Again, the goal is to design this site so that there's options for, multiple additional capacity as well. So, but this phase would build the first phase, and then depending on what's needed next.
So knowing that field space will not be there or anything like that, will there be discussions with Eastside Catholic about potentially accessing theirs?
All discussions will be
Okay,
open, yeah.
Yeah, in this concept design also, there is a field there, but it's not necessarily a secondary comprehensive high school setup. It's just
Right.
more of a elementary-like field.
it would be an interesting partnership to explore.
Yeah. Okay, so the high school capacity on the west side, in 2017, again, we performed a feasibility study on the campus of Kamiakin Middle School. the site options for this West Side High School capacity is on the Kamiakin campus or on new property of which we have not located. So this shows that on this concept design, that we have a new middle school built to the north with the option of having another choice school on the campus while maintaining the existing building for other types of services, preschool or swing space.
If you have the existing middle, you add a choice and whatever else you've got there, I mean, what kind of population are we talking about moving into? I realize that, you'll still have X number of students in the middle, but how much in that given block of space?
So, yeah, I mean, our new middle schools would be built to house 900
Right,
students.
right.
And then we typically build a choice campus to house 600 students. And
all
then
right.
if we add preschool capacity as well, so,
15 to
so yeah,
16?
1,600
Okay.
on that campus, so. And again, this is also a potential for a more urbanized design as well.
Yeah, and the targeted opening for this would be fall 2027, which could potentially align with the Kamiakin Phase 2 of Building Excellence.
Okay.
Okay, so moving into cash flow. And Barbara, you might want to take this slide.
I will talk about the cash flow. So if you recall a similar situation when we did the 2019 construction levy, we asked our voters for funds over a 6-year time period. And that's the same with the 2022 construction levy. Funds will be coming over, actually over 8 years, because it affects half the year in 2023 and then half a year in 28, 29. So we will be receiving those funds, but of course, our goal is to build our capacity, and our capacity needs are needed yesterday. And so one of the things that we've done in the past and that we could do with this project, and so the initial, on the left is the initial projected expenditures, accumulated expenditures. The first column is the revenue that's coming in from the levy. So you can see over time, we will get 18 million next year, once the spring collection, and then that will grow again to 295 million by the 28-29 school year. And then the spending plan, you can see that really the bulk of the spending is to open those middle school additions in fall of '24. And so the bulk of the spending happens in the 23-24 school year, and then that continues with the new elementary campus, the new secondary capacity. So just looking at the construction levy cash flow alone, we wouldn't be able to, we have a cash flow problem. You can see we're about $53 million short in the 24-25 school year. So one of the things that we've done to resolve that is do what's called a limited general obligation bond. They're non-voted bonds. They can only be used for additions, not new construction. Again, we're continuing to check with legal counsel to make sure all of the requirements for that, because things can change over time. And so so what we're looking at is, again, an LGO. It's a short-term debt, and it's paid back with the levy proceeds. So it's not paid back with other proceeds. The principal is paid back with levy. The interest does need to be paid back with another source, such as our state construction assistance funds. So we would bring a resolution for board action for $50 million, most likely, again, in the 23-24 school year, because we're not needing to do that today. So that would allow us to keep maintaining that schedule. Again, it's a public hearing, requires board action. How bond sales work is you sell the bond sale at a premium, so you are receiving more money, cash up front than what needs to be paid back in principal, and then that helps offset the interest costs as well. So the net cost for an LGO bond sale is about $3 million, and without the LGO bond sale, we would need to delay the projects, and then, of course, in the inflation with construction is continuing to rise, and so it could increase our cost by up to $17 million. So again, we'll continue to dig into the details on this, and again, nothing that we need to take action on right away, but we'll let you know timing and details on that.
Can I say it a little bit differently?
Yes.
We have two options. We can delay construction and spend more money on the construction cost, or we can sell LGO bonds and it will cost about a total of $3 million. And so keeping our projects on time is important because of student needs, and it also fiscally works out better to go the LGO route versus delaying construction because of inflation and escalation.
So the 3 million of the LGO is projected to be far less than the inflation factor, correct? I assume. Okay.
Yeah, the
Makes
$3
sense.
million for the LGOs is less than.
Yeah,
than
Yes.
so no,
delaying.
that's why I assumed, that's why I
Exactly,
want to make
especially
sure
in this construction.
everyone at home
inflation
understood.
market.
What's the anticipated delay timeline that you're using to get to 17 million?
It's a year, I think
Yeah,
it was a
1 year
year.
delay on all
1 year delay?
projects, yeah.
And I believe our estimate is it 8% annually?
Yeah,
8%.
we're currently estimating 8%. Interestingly enough, in 2021 itself, construction escalation was 10%. And so we were.
Is that because of the concrete strike?
It's a lot of factors, really. I mean, there were multiple strikes during that time
Right.
as well, but supply chain
Cost of materials.
and resources, yeah.
You said 8%?
Yeah.
And so the bond estimates for the LGOs, that's short-term debt. I assume that that's closer to the inflation rate than it is to whatever the long-term interest rate is from Treasury. But even so, if we're off by a factor of 2, it's 6 million versus 17 million. So, okay.
And we will need to keep an eye on interest rates because
Yeah.
they have been creeping up. And so, and these estimates were done probably a month or so ago, and things keep changing. So, again, we'll continue to refine the numbers. And
Is it true the last 2 times we've done construction levies, we've used the LGO strategy to fund construction?
that is true.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
2011 and 2019.
That's something we ought to make very apparent to our public and our parents, the fact that this isn't some new strategy. We've done it before, it's worked, it's been cost effective, and so this is not a new fantasy land we're entering. It's a tried and true method that we've used before, and it's been very successful for us. I think they need to know that.
It can only be used to fund additions to existing campuses. Is that right? Okay. Does the Redmond Elementary campus count as I'm just trying to think about the.
Nope. We
state.
are working with legal counsel
Yeah.
on that.
I could make I think there's an argument. Okay.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. So. We also don't want to, we also don't want to ask for more than we need either. So, so given the cash flow numbers, but. Okay, I think
Okay.
so we, yeah, 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, it is 8:58. We'll take 8:59 now. We'll take a 6-minute break, start at 9:05.
All right. All right, we're going to continue with Phase 2 and the work that we're doing for planning for potential 2024 bond. So the first thing I wanted to go over is provide updated enrollment projections and what are the enrollment trends that will help inform decisions about our capital construction planning. Every year for the last, I think it's been 3 or 4 years, Flow Analytics, we work with an outside demographer, Flow Analytics, to provide our enrollment projections. And as we mentioned earlier, you know, COVID, the pandemic has really impacted our trend data. So it's hard to, you know, we've been pretty, pre-pandemic, our trends were pretty consistent, and post-pandemic, that has been impacted. But we know that construction is still occurring. We know that housing growth is happening, and we know that enrollment growth is projected. And we also know that our schools, given that most of them are at capacity, are really constrained about you know, their ability to flex as enrollment increases and decreases. Our demographer, you know, when they do boundary processes, they like to, you know, they told us when they first started meeting with us, oh, when we do boundary processes, we like to target our schools at 70 to 80% capacity. And we just looked at them like, that's not possible in this district because every school is really at capacity. So, but part of our building excellence plan is, again, to build additional classrooms so we can, so schools have more flexibility as neighborhoods shift. We know that not all of our schools are even able to house programs for their own students that live in the neighborhood, such as gifted and special ed. You know, the Lake Washington Learning Area elementary schools, none of those schools have gifted on their campuses. We also know that we have 162 portables across the district, housing up to 3,700 students. And so we want to, again, over time, reduce our reliance on portables. You know, we have over the years, you know, since our growth, since 2008, since we've had this significant growth, we've continued to address overcrowding by adding portables, by doing boundary changes, reducing our standards of service, using rooms that weren't intended to be classrooms as classrooms. And the only option that we haven't done that could be used to address overcrowding is increasing class size. But that is an option should we need to use it. We also, as we talked earlier, core spaces are crowded gyms, commons, libraries, our parking lots. You know, some of our secondary schools are not able to offer certain courses due to space constraints for science and CTE. So all of that is kind of our current conditions. And so,
Barbara, before
Yes.
you go, could you also just offer term definitions when we use terms such as permanent capacity and total capacity? Can you just remind
Absolutely.
us all of what those terms mean?
yeah. So we're going to share, so permanent capacity is the capacity that's actually built. That's our core space, classroom capacity, and then total capacity includes capacity for portables. So those 162 portables are included in total capacity. But if we removed every portable from the district, the permanent capacity, that is reflected in permanent capacity. And so I'm going to go through some visual slides. You have the data. Go ahead, Leah.
Sorry, could you explain the thought process behind why you're saying Flow Analytics considered 70 to 75% of a school to be at capacity? Could you explain why that is?
So because it allows you to have flexibility as neighborhoods grow, the ebb and flow, because all schools, you know, see increases in enrollment, and then as neighborhoods mature, sometimes they decrease, but it allows you that flexibility, and it allows you space for programming, and again, those things, those changes that may occur over time, such as gifted programs, different types of programs for other special programs, so.
So I think
John, go
I
ahead.
heard Director Choi's question a little bit differently.
okay.
Flow analytics, and if I'm answering the wrong question, just let me know. Flow analytics, their target for any individual school is that you only assign students up to about 70 to 80% of that school's capacity, because then as maybe a neighborhood turns over and all of a sudden you have more students from a certain portion within that school boundary, well, then that school can accommodate that already without needing to go to the options of adding portables, boundaries, all of those kind of draconian measures just to find space. What we find right now is so many of our schools have, they're at that 90 to 100% capacity already. So there's really no flexibility. And when we think about our schools in Kirkland, they can't really even provide the regional programming that students really should be afforded. When I say that, in particular, our Quest program. We don't have students, or we don't have a Quest program right now located within the Kirkland region, that schools that transition up to Lake Washington High School, they're currently bused out of that area to receive their programming. So and so for us, it wasn't even a mental model to think of 70 to 80%. And part of that has been the ongoing conversation around, well, if you have an empty classroom, you don't need more schools. Well, that's not really how you right size a school district for the long term. And I think the mindset that we all have taken over the last maybe 18 months is, how do we think about this school district in a 50 to 70 year consideration rather than 3 to 5 years?
To that point, giving it a microcosm, if you will, the Elm Tree Edition, which was built like 25 years ago, and we moved in about 16 years ago into that area. When we moved in, virtually all of the families were middle to high school age range. And in the last 5 years, virtually all the empty nesters are gone, and all of them have been replaced with families with 2 and 3 kids about yay tall. And so all of a sudden that turnover just boomed for the elementary schools. I mean, it was just, I can't get over the number of kids, like I said, so far, as opposed to the ones who are in the high school.
So the one other piece I think about that is the infill that's also occurring, where one house was on a lot, and then that one
Yeah.
gets sold and torn down, and 4 houses are put on that lot, and those are within our neighborhood schools. And so by having a lower capacity, you can absorb some of that infill that's going to start happening too. That's another reason.
I guess a follow-up question would then be, is a 20 to 30% increase in students over, the variable is X time frame, right? Is that realistic for most of our schools then, like the expectation?
I just want to make sure I understand the question. Is your question, are we expecting 20 to 30% growth at each school?
I'm asking, is it realistic for us to expect that type of an increase at the majority of our schools if the goal was to plan at a 70% capacity or 75% capacity enrollment for each school?
Mm-hmm.
And then fund accordingly and build accordingly to achieve that goal? Is it realistic to say that the majority of those schools will have at some point a 20 to 30% increase in capacity in enrollment?
Yeah, so
And
we
I
actually
think the answer
haven't,
is yes, but
internally, we haven't targeted the 70 to 80%. We've
Right.
targeted more of a 80 to 89% for our schools. And it's both enrollment increases and program changes. So both of those are considerations for how we use capacity.
So the one other piece still hanging out there is class size reductions that have been passed at the legislature and how we do those. And we haven't been able to get to full student ratio. We utilize specialists in which to get to that ratio component. Some of that's due to space issues and not having the space to be able to do so. So this really is that long-term thinking of how do you start to address. We know early learning is going to start coming as well, and probably become a mandatory issue. As we have to think about that space, we have to think about the potential in 5 to 10 years of what's coming, and that will allow for some of that flexibility.
Okay, so I want to just share some of the charts that Flow Analytics has prepared for us. And we use kind of a 4-color chart. Flow has 5, but they're both, the last 2 are red. But really, again, the blue is kind of what we call under capacity, 0 to 79%. Green would be at capacity, that's that 80 to 90% range. Beginning to be critical capacity is the yellow, 90 to 90%. And then anything above 100% is really in the red capacity. So at the elementary level, and the chart right now, we're asking them to do some without portables, but this does include portables, so it's total capacity right now. And we know, again, our long-term goal is to reduce our reliance on portables. So just at the elementary level, we know that we just built additions at our in the Lake Washington area. And so we will be needing, even though we're not talking about boundaries today, we know that we need a boundary process there to rebalance some of that enrollment, because as you can see, we have some schools in that area, the Twain and Rush are, at critical capacity, and the other schools because of the additions. And so we will need to make some boundary changes there. We have continued growth in downtown Redmond, that it will be a pinch point. And then as Mark, I think, mentioned, Sammamish Town Center, that will start coming on. And so we want to make sure we have capacity there as well.
Quick question for y'all. I see I can read Carson, I can read McCullough, or Smith rather. What is the little yellow at the very bottom? Is that somebody else's turf or
The
what?
red, sorry,
I see the red on
So-
for Smith, and I see Carson in the kind of the pinkish, if you will, and there's a little tiny square at the very bottom.
Is the other piece of McAuliffe?
that's McCullough's boundary.
Yeah. That's called a piece of history.
Never mind, never mind.
All
I'm
right.
very visual, okay?
So, and then just to show, and then 6 out of our 8 middle schools will be at or over capacity by 2031. And again, these projections go out to 2031. And so as the 2022 levy is providing additions in Kirkland and Redmond, the Lake Washington boundary process will need to balance Rose Hill Middle and Kirkland, as Dr. Holman already mentioned. And then we know, while it shows Inglewood is at capacity, but we also know it's our largest middle school. So,
And also want to comment on, Inglewood being at capacity. I believe our next slide shows Eastlake is at capacity. To be able to accomplish that, we had to shoehorn classrooms into spaces that really weren't designed for it. And so while, yes, the capacity number may look decent, if you will, it really is a campus that was developed for much less students. And even though, like at Eastlake, we have an addition, we still have transitioned, spaces that weren't intended to be classroom spaces into classrooms.
So is there a way to visualize that? That the school was built for X capacity, and we are now at, that's the challenge that's missing here, is the numbers at that. I know Redmond Middle is, 1,100 at this point, right? So you miss that component where we set sort of the standards of 900 and 1,200. How do these play out within that? So
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it, but I'd toss it to
This is all
Glenn.
those interior modifications have been done over time, and our capital facility plan kind of does talk through kind of the strategies we've done over the last 6 years or so, and but we can try to visually show how we.
Can you also talk about the difference between how we determine capacity at the elementary level versus the secondary level?
Sure. So our elementary level capacity is based on an average class size of 23 across the elementary. But at secondary, their average class size is, in the 30 range, but we also discount that by about 80% because we know students are taking at the middle school, they take 6 periods, but teachers teach for 5. And so we need space for our teachers to plan. And at the secondary, and then with our new schools, though, we build separate planning areas so that classrooms can be used more efficiently and be used all 6 periods. So in our older buildings, they were planning in their classrooms. When we design our newer buildings, we have planning areas for those teachers so that we can utilize that. But we also know that you're not utilizing every classroom at 100% in a secondary school 100% of the day.
Could I ask a clarifying question? So with these, because these are out to 2031, these projections, correct? So do they take into consideration plans that we know are going to be implemented because of our levy that just passed through like 2024, 25? Is this inclusive?
Yeah, so this does not include the new capacity. So this does not include the new capacity for the 2022 levy.
Okay.
So that will add, that will change some of these numbers. But what what our goal was to show kind of what is the current status and then, why we put the plans in place we did for the building excellence phase, the 3-phase plan. Okay.
And then the next iteration of these will remove portables from the numbers.
And then just the high school slide, John already talked about Eastlake. So again, while they're projected at capacity, they're already over 2,200, and that's through additions, that's through interior modifications. So they are already exceeding kind of our desired high school size and projected to, and they've been growing. We have that bubble. As we were growing in elementary, that bubble hit middle school, and it's hitting our high schools now, and so that's also happening.
May I suggest,
Yep.
as we're talking to our communities, as opposed to having a color coding that says at capacity or at 90% capacity of planned capacity, we look at actual capacity and show them that they are already in the red zones. Because if I looked at this not knowing from that description and being perhaps a skeptical taxpayer, I might say, well, hell, you got plenty of space. But to be more realistic, we need to really build in that additional space that's been added, whether we've divided rooms, whether we've taken away a science lab, whether we've added portables. I think that needs to be played out on the map, to be quite frank, to show that it's more of a dire situation than that one shows. I mean, it's major.
Okay. All right. So the other piece we wanted to share with you today, and we have shared this with you in past study sessions, but what land or property is currently available to build capacity. And so you should have in your packet that we shared a property inventory sheet. And so again, this is a list of our what we call undeveloped property, so that's completely vacant property, and then underdeveloped property, so that's like our Redmond Elementary campus where there's additional capacity on that property. And a reminder, we purchased property, in the 70s before, and then after that, King County put together an urban growth area. And so that happened in 1994. They limited development outside the urban growth line. So if we have a current school, that is outside the urban growth line, it can be rebuilt, but it limited what vacant property can be developed. And then there's a siting task force that, again, provided additional recommendations. So we do also have some property with schools that have capacity for additional program space. So I'll just visually, you've got it again on your handout, but in the Sammamish area, this is the location of Site 59 that Brian already reviewed, and that is a 15-acre property. And just a reminder, our current typical elementary is built on 10 acres. A typical middle school is on 15 to 20 acres, and a typical high school is on 40 acres. So,
Quick question.
but that's before urban
Do we,
design.
the fact that we have those properties in the non-urban growth areas, do we have any visualization, some map that may be coming up that I'm jumping the gun on, that shows where those properties are in relationship to the UGA? Are they, half a mile, 10 miles? How far are
Yep.
into the, because if it's so close, you could probably make it a case of being able to expand into it whereas if it's, 10 miles into it, you don't have a prayer.
Okay, so this is the Redmond, again, Sammamish, we have one property that we own, and that is within the UGA, so it
Right.
can be built on. And then this is the properties kind of in the Redmond area. The gray, as a reminder, again, the gray is within the UGA, and also the Redmond Ridge area is within the UGA. So we have our Cadman site that we just purchased last May, so that's about 25 acres. Site 44 is that new site number. We also have a small property, 3.4 acres, Site 91, that is also within the urban growth boundary. To your point, Mark, the closest one that we have to the urban growth boundary is the Site 90, which is 26 acres. And per King County, because that's outside right now, you cannot use that for school use. Per the recommendations of the siting task force. We could, however, use it for park use such as stadiums, fields, activity centers, school bus base.
Okay.
It could be used for those type of things, but just not school use.
My question really was looking at all that east capacity that is outside the UGA. We have nothing out there really.
Not further out.
So it's basically in the confined areas where the UGA has kind of got a small little island, if you will. All right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Site 90 is the Nike missile site. I know it's been remediated by the military, but is it still something where we would have to do additional stuff to even think about using it? I mean, are there silos that would have to be removed or otherwise filled in?
So we'd have to go in and do that due diligence there. There may be some remediation related to the missile silos. They're not silos, but they're bays. But for the most part, the military, and we've torn down and remediated any of the old structures that were left there.
I mean, when you say I visualize a missile site as being very confined. How much space really are we talking about acres? Not up and down, but I mean side to side, if you will.
So on the site, in the 26.9 acres, we do have like the missile launch.
Right, but I'm saying that Nike site is actually X number of miles wide and long and so forth. How big of a site is that?
It's, I think what you're asking is how big is the actual site? It's
Yeah.
quite big. It's 26.9
Okay,
acres.
thank you. Yeah.
And you can see on the diagram there's a little sliver and then a larger piece. And the larger piece is where the missile bays were.
Okay. So we could have a subterranean school.
Yeah.
We also have Site 33, which is the most northern part, which is 20 acres. That also no school use allowed. on that. There is some potential conservation value right now. And then Site 75, which is just south of that green area, is 37 acres. And there is the King County Siting Task Force did say that if an alternative site could not be found, the district could use the site for a small 5-acre environmental school. So there's potential future use there. The other, on your handout, I don't have this mapped, but is the underdeveloped property. We've talked about some of these today, but Rose Hill Elementary School also has, similar to Redmond Elementary, they have some vacant property in front of Rose Hill Elementary, and so that could be used for additional program options. That's potential for, again, preschool classrooms or additional capacity there. We've talked about Kamiakin Middle School, that when the school is rebuilt, there's potential capacity there. The Emerson campus, potential capacity for additional program options and facility redesign in that campus. We've talked about Redmond L and the Orsh campus, and then Old Dickinson, as we moved the preschool program to Old Redmond Schoolhouse, and then we have removed the old portable structures on Old Dickinson, so we have that campus. And just Old Dickinson by itself is around 6.3 acres. The whole campus is 77 acres with Dickinson and Evergreen. But we can develop that undeveloped portion for a school site, and so there are still limitations on that development through King County. You have to work through that process. So that's what we have now, and kind of what we're we take this into consideration as we're thinking about all our future projects. So, and there.
Quick question. And maybe I'm just not seeing it here on the chart, but maybe it's me. The Nike site, is that portrayed in any of those red zones there, or should I be visualizing it someplace else?
Are you talking about Site 90?
Is that Site 90?
Yes.
Yeah, Site
Okay,
90
thank you.
is-
Thank you
yeah.
very much.
So,
Okay, now I understand.
yeah, and there was a bill passed by the legislature that said the UGA boundary lines could be moved if you could find another piece of land to swap with it. It's unlikely that King County will consider making any changes to the urban growth
Yeah,
boundary
I
line.
understand.
They have not been, they've not had interest in doing that, but it may, there may be other counties such as Snohomish or other counties that that bill may allow, but.
And so truly a question just to see if it's ever been proposed before. Perigo Park is right next to Nike. Perigo's inside the UGA, Nike's outside. Have we ever explored a swap?
Not yet,
Okay.
so,
It was just passed within
Yeah.
the last few
Yeah.
weeks, and so, believe me, I've had all sorts of swap conversations, and Barbara keeps telling me, nope, that probably wouldn't work, but we're gonna land on one that does work.
yeah. Yeah, again, now that that legislation has passed, it at least opens up the conversations. Yeah. Okay. So that's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so then we want to just, so phase 2 of the Building Excellence Plan, as originally kind of planned, had these projects in them. So we had the 5th Comprehensive High School, which would provide capacity for 800 secondary students, high school students, and also then addressing some of our aging facilities, such as Alcott Elementary, such as Kamiakin. Even though the additions that we had the additions on the Lake Washington High School, Lake Washington Elementary schools. We know that in the long-term future, we're still going to need additional elementary capacity in the Lake Washington area. So Phase 2 had capacity there. And then another aging school is Smith Elementary. And then early learning in the Lake Washington area, and again, the Rose Hill site is a potential for additional early learning capacity. And then we also had some refurbishment of the Juanita Fieldhouse and pool, and Brian will talk a little bit about more of that later with some new grant funding that we received. So that was the initial thinking for the Phase 2. So Brian's going to go in and, sorry.
So one quick question. When I remember back to when we were initially building the elementary schools, I think of Barton and Baker, there was, the capacity was at 550 when we were dealing with class size that's put forward. It could get expanded to 690 based on the way that we were doing the specialists in pieces. My question is, I see that we now utilize 690 as the size, so I'm just curious as to how this plays out in regards to that component.
So 550 was based on kind of the lower McCleary class sizes. So if we lowered all of our class sizes, then our capacities would be reduced at all of our schools. And so because of space constraints, we are not, we haven't done that, so we're using the current capacities at those schools. All of our schools, Barton and Baker and Meade and Kirk, they were built with 690 capacity, but they also have room for additions. And so we're designing all of our schools for additions.
But if we were to implement the McCleary class size reduction to it would be at 550 would be the capacity that they were built, correct?
Yeah, I'd have to do the recalculations. And 550 was also in our previous pre-2016 bond program. We were building our schools at the 450 to 550, depending on.
I just remember that this was a discussion we had with that 2016 bond, and that the fact that it could grow to 690 as needed in regards to how we could handle the class size and with growth coming through. So this is sort of that question as we look long-term, what is the size of those elementary schools? If we were, there's the McCleary piece, if the legislature decides this is what you must do, period, there is huge impact. So I think we have to be planning and thinking about those pieces as well.
The legislature already holds districts accountable to class size in K3, and we are meeting the required class sizes in K3. So you're correct, if the legislature provides additional funding to continue to reduce lower class sizes, that's going to impact our capacity across the district. Similar to what, all-day kindergarten did when
Right.
that was required, that districts across the state had to find additional capacity to house all-day kindergarten students.
Right. I know there has been discussion that you move to direct head count in a classroom as opposed to doing it through, and we use specialists in which to be able to get that ratio to where it needs to be. So I'm just saying, as we speak to capacity in 5, 10 years or 15 years, I think we have to be thinking about that component too. Right now, we have flexibility to be able to go larger when needed, but that won't always necessarily be the case.
Could I ask, what is the average age of our schools that we are putting additions or rebuilding?
I don't have that off the top of my head, so we can get that information. Yeah. Mark?
Quick question. When we look at a new comprehensive high school, we're looking at a fifth of my question is, of the lands we own, the closest we come to enough turf, but not really enough, is Cadman.
Yeah, we're going to
We're gonna
talk
get
about
into
that
that.
the next
Thank
slide.
you.
Yep, so good
That's
setup.
a
Mark.
segue.
All right, so in looking at the comprehensive high school, we really kind of looked at multiple sites. Cadman, Site 44 is one. The Evergreen Middle School and Dickinson Elementary site is another. And then, of course, finding new property inside the urban growth boundary is another option. Advantages related to Cadman is it's geographically located in an area of need. There's potential to purchase adjacent properties for fields as Cadman continues to reduce their plant there. There's potential opportunity to partner with Microsoft. They're in feasibility on an adjacent parcel right now. And there's potential for innovative solutions as it relates to off-site or centralized athletic fields. Disadvantages, it's less than our usual optimal size of 40 acres. It may not fit the traditional athletic fields that are at comprehensive high schools. We do need to change some zoning codes with the city, which we're working on. And it's also an ideal site for an elementary school. The Evergreen Middle School and Dickinson Elementary site currently, well, it's one parcel. It's 77.3 acres. It's large enough to have a comprehensive high school and maintain Dickinson Elementary in its current site. It is outside the urban growth area and would require approval from the King County Growth Management Council. It would require us to rebuild and expand Evergreen Middle School on a new site and would require concurrent construction, funding, and movement of a fifth comprehensive high school and Evergreen. And then one note is up on Union Hill, the traffic in that area is quite congested, and the infrastructure is just challenging for a comprehensive high school. Yeah. And then obviously new property, it's a potential for us to have an urban design or adaptive reuse. Disadvantages is really finding property inside the urban growth area.
Quick question. Since we know Cadman is not the optimal at 40, if we're building up on Cadman, does that help us acquire that quote-unquote 40 acres, if you will?
Potential, we do have some feasibilities, concept designs that you've seen, so we'll touch on those.
But then again, if you take Evergreen, let us say, and flip it over to Cadman, and then take that Dickinson Evergreen campus and turn it into an elementary/high school area, you're going to have the capacity or the space capacity?
Yeah, the Evergreen site is large enough for a traditional comprehensive high school.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
It just has some other restrictions. We're going to have to get approval. Currently, it's not approved for a comprehensive high school.
And the traffic,
Yeah. And it's, holding a middle school and elementary school on it right now.
I think another factor is, currently funding for Evergreen Middle School is in phase 3 of the plan.
Okay.
And so we would have to reconstruct the entire phase 2, which would then impact other programs.
I was trying to figure out how realistic really is that.
So why did we include it? We wanted the board to know just all kind of the depth of considerations we've done to this point. It's a good option for a lot of reasons, but there's some factors that make it. To be honest with you, I think the traffic is as big a concern as anything, knowing that all of our high schools have challenges. That site presently has challenges, and they don't have student drivers.
Right.
So.
Well, and with the Evergreen site, you have property on that west side of, 208th, that seems to be already developed but underutilized, if you will. I don't know. My thought is, I appreciate the idea of bringing all the options. Even though there's downsides, the idea is we're looking at different ways of painting the barn, if you will.
If I can add to this, I'm a little concerned that we say optimal size is 40 acres, because that's just what we have built. There are lots of high schools that are not on 40 acres. So I do think we need to start changing our language and how we speak about this so that we can create the picture of being different of what a very excellent high school can be on 20 acres.
Yep, I agree.
To that point, by building Cadman up to 5 stories, whatever capacity is,
3 more slides.
And so each of the concepts you'll see on Cadman all include building up, and I believe we reach maximum height on the construction site, correct?
Yeah,
during the levy this past fall, there were accusations, and I don't think they're founded, but I want to make sure we can put them to rest, that there weren't sufficient soil samplings of the area to make sure that there's nothing toxic left. And we have the independent soil analyses, I assume.
correct. Yeah.
And and because of that, I think we need to make that very well known. Because otherwise, then you've got the people saying, oh my God, you're going to kill my kid by putting that school there.
Right, yeah, so what we found during our feasibility period of the property was not unlike what we've experienced at other sites. We will have to do further investigation, but it's nothing popped out that was unusual.
No, but by virtue of the fact that that was a quote-unquote industrial site,
Yeah,
I don't want to give somebody ammunition that we don't have to give.
sure.
And I'd like to take it away preemptively,
Yeah.
so.
Sorry, and I don't know if you're going to go over this, but how would, because of the location of where the 5th comprehensive school would be versus the capacity concerns in other areas of the district for our high schools, how would the boundaries change to accommodate or for this to be helpful?
So obviously today, we're not bringing a boundary proposal, but so we would have to go through a process to change the boundaries. And so we would have public hearings and determine how to redraw the boundaries for a 5th comprehensive high school. We had we shared some slides in our study session planning up for planning to the levy, kind of laying out the projections for our high schools and options. And so those are back in our our prior study session slides. But yeah, when we build new campuses, just like we did with Timberline, just like we did with Baker and Barton, we have to go through boundary processes.
And so wherever a 5th is, there will be a boundary process.
So there was kind of two profiles of boundary changes that we brought. One was just looking at Eastlake and Redmond and what does that create for a 5th comprehensive. The other was looking at kind of, if you will, equitable distribution of students across all 5 high schools and what that looks like. So we'll provide those slides for you so you can see what those were. But yes,
Perfect, thank you.
it'll be an adventure, that's for sure.
Okay, so for the Cadman site, there's an aerial there on the right. We're working with the city of Redmond during their zoning code update to remove the gross area limitation for educational facilities as well as the capacity limitation for educational facilities. We believe these are ongoing within their normal process now and should not be an issue. During permitting, we'll also discuss about reducing buffer areas because currently this is a commercial zone and directly to the south is a residential zone, as well as working through the transportation master plan for the roads that are designed for that site.
And I'll just add, the city's been very collaborative with us, and we again have regular communications with them. So this while it just takes time for the city to go through the process, we don't anticipate any concerns.
Well, it would seem like with FedEx going in there and UPS being in there, they've already started looking at the traffic flow in a bigger way, if you will, because they're not thinking about it as neighborhoods, they're talking about major vehicles moving through there.
Correct, yeah.
Is that red area the buffer zone?
No, that red area is our parcel
Oh, I see.
on the Cadman site. And directly north of the larger portion, so on the east section of our parcel, is where Microsoft is in feasibility.
And Leah, the miracle is the green stuff on the right is where the UGA
Yeah,
hits.
yeah. So at the time, during our feasibility, we did test fits. This is something you've seen before, but this is a test fit of a 2 to 3 story secondary school with some fields and parking. The next one we looked at is a 4-story school with some structured parking, which provides some additional space for fields. And then lastly, we looked at the potential of multiple schools, an elementary school and then potentially a choice school.
But that option really doesn't feed our desire,
Correct, yeah.
a choice school really is not
Yeah.
going to feed the bulldog when it comes to getting our capacity down in Redmond High and East Lake High. Okay, so it's not really it's a nice idea, but.
Okay. So just a little bit about the field house and pool. In October, we applied for an aquatics grant through King County, essentially to support the funding of life cycle assets that we're replacing for HVAC, some pool equipment, some ADA upgrades, and of course the roof. We do have building and systems improvements planned in our levy. We were notified that we were awarded $1.8 million as a grant. So in doing this work now, we believe that we'll be able to remove about $9 million out of what was being initially estimated in the bond for the field house improvements.
Should that be the 2022?
Yeah, well, we have life cycle building and system improvements planned in 2018 and 2022, so. Okay. And this really is just renderings. We're talking about concept designs and renderings for a 2024 bond. This just shows you what is possible for an approximate $100,000. You can get some renderings so that the community can see what you're actually planning to build. And so we just wanted to show you what this looks like.
So yeah, our plan as we, the next 2 years, work up to this 2024 bond is to make sure is to invest the $125,000 to do some design rendering so that we can better inform our community and they can have a visual of see and understand what they're what we're visioning for these projects as they would vote on a potential bond.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're doing this, right? Excellent.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure, it says investment per project. It isn't $125,000 per project.
Yeah.
That's a total cost. When I think about the feedback we've received from community around what are we voting on? One of the things that we continue to hear is we want to see and understand a little more detail. And what this does, because there's different ways you can provide design renderings, this actually gets down to some level of programmatic design as well. So it isn't just, an architect doing a nice drawing for us. There's actual staff engagement in the process to ensure that what we're showing actually has some level of feasibility and programmatic design as well. And so it'll be a much more thorough experience for our community to understand what we're proposing in the 24 bond.
All right, I think I'll take the next one. Okay, so, and then this slide is a reminder of what projects were in the Phase 3 portion. This would be when we would come back and do a 2028 construction levy. And so continue to renewal construction levy, continue to address capacity and aging facilities. So this would where we would rebuild and expand Evergreen Middle School. We would expand the West Side High School capacity. So again, back in the fall, when we looked at kind of the options and the needs for high school, we knew that we probably would need to expand our capacity on the West Side. Rebuilding and enlarging Rockwell Elementary, 2 new elementary schools, those are TBD where they were needed, but based on, again, projected growth. And then preschool, early learning in the Juanita area. And as I mentioned, the potential, there's other options, but potential for that could be as well on the Kamiakin campus. So additional capacity for over 2,000 students. So then I just wanted to remind kind of at the time, when we put the Building Excellence Plan together last fall, what was the financing plan? So this slide goes through a reminder, our 3-step process, the February 22 construction levy, which passed, bond in 24, and then the renewal in 28. The current tax rate in 21 was $1.15 per thousand of AV. And then the increase when we pass the 2022 levy, which begins in the 2023 calendar year, is was about 12 cents. So $120 on a home valued at $1 million. And that levy stays, that rate per thousand stays the same with the 2024 bond. And then when the levy would be renewed in 2028, the tax rate was estimated to increase by 15 cents or $150 a year for a home valued at $1 million. Again, I just want to remind folks that the rate per thousand includes our 2019 capital construction levy, our prior bonds. It's all of our current debt and levies related to construction. So that's a reminder as we get closer to developing the bond proposal. We will be, we'll continue to work with our bond underwriter to, update things. And we know that interest rates are changing, and so.
And there's already been one item today that's been modified on that list, and that's
Correct.
the Juanita Pool and Field House with some of the pieces that Brian presented. That lowers the total amount that would be asked for on a bond. So there's a number of factors that play into what this will look like.
So one thing I'm just going to throw out, as you look at the aging facilities, I know there are 2 that are left in Phase 3, Evergreen and Rockwell. Thinking of the experience with Juanita High School and having one left that we needed to be able to get through onto a bond was really quite challenging and problematic in many ways. So as this goes forward and you think about it, what is potential to potentially put Evergreen and Rockwell into Phase 2 so that the aging buildings are addressed completely in one fell swoop?
The other pieces I want to just bring to you is kind of what are the other funds that we have remaining to support construction projects, pre-design, and planning. So wanted to give you a quick financial update on the 2016 bonds. We're so close to getting those closed out. We still have Juanita to finalize, but so the voters passed a $398 million bond, and that allowed us to to have state construction assistance funds, impact fees, and interest earnings, an additional $60 million because of that bond. And so we had $458 million in total revenue for those projects. We've spent $429 on the construction projects, or $430 million, and the remaining, and then $21 million we used for the property purchase, Cadman, and then so we have about $7 million remaining from our 2016 bond. And then as far as our 2019 levy, again, that was $120 million 6-year capital projects levy. We also had $32 million in construction assistance funds, bond funds, impact fees, so 152 total program revenue. We still have our core additions at Rose Hill, Franklin, and Twain, the addition at Carson. So we're another year or two away from finalizing these numbers, but right now we're estimating about $139 million. And so we anticipate having $13 million remaining that we can reserve for property and future capital needs. So between the two programs, there's about $20 million that we can also again, use for some of that planning, pre-design, and property needs. So the other, so then we wanted to talk to you about election trends for special elections. The majority of districts run their levy and bond elections in what's called a special election, where the November election is a general election. And so we asked D.A. Davidson, our bond underwriter, to provide some statistics around election and voting history, especially when it comes to bond capital construction measures. So, and all right, so this is the presentation that they put together. And so this slide shows the school election voting history. I included, even though this is EP&O and that's not really what we're talking about today, but just showing the voting history and the, over 80%, and I'm sorry, my eyes are bad and I can't read these charts from here. I need to get my glasses, but yeah, it's about, so again, 80% measure, and you can see they drew a line after the the simple majority was passed in 2007. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. And so, so this slide is the capital, go to the next slide, Brian. I'm reading off Brian's screen. Capital projects levy, and you can see the, again, in the high 80s, low 90s for most capital projects levies. And then the next slide is school bonds. And so you can see the change in the percentages for bonds is, again, after in the 2010, anywhere from high 60s, but more recently in the 50s, but 30s, and then in the last election, 18% passed.
And just to be clear, this is showing the percent of measures passing,
Right,
not the average
Thank you, John.
approval.
Yes.
And so you can see in 2011, 15% of overall measures that were issued that year passed. There were 33 measures on ballots across the state of Washington that year. And so you can, it's a varied history.
All right, and then this chart shows the kind of the statistics for when you submit a proposition to the voters. So in February, and the yellow bar is the EP&O, again, passing rates, not percentage passed, but passing rates. The green is capital levies, and then the bond is in the brown. And so you can see, EP&Os in February have a 92% passing rate, and then that drops to 58% in August, 80% in November. With capital levies, it's again 90% in February, and then in the 70s to 80s in the other election cycles. And then with bonds, it's about 48% in February, or has been, 32% in April, 14 in August, and then about 36% in November. Siri?
Can they break this out based as when we went to all-mail election?
And
I don't know if that was
yes,
20
we could, do the all mail, yeah.
Mail-in ballots?
Yeah, when we shifted to all-mail-in ballots, and there was no longer, I think that was like 2010-ish, around there.
Let's see, I want to make sure I went to the right slide here. Okay, and then this slide is just kind of looking at November only. The results during a presidential election, midterm election, which would be happening this November. And so just the percentage of passing versus failing. We know that many school districts have been moving to a November bond election. And some have even moved their EP&O. One district that I'm aware of is moving their EP&O elections to November. But so you can just see the passage rate, 45% in presidential November election, 30% in a midterm, and then just other 36%. Okay, and then this slide shows just recent King County school districts, or which measures have passed since 2000. So when they've run them in November, 7 out of 10 bond issues have passed in the November elections. So the red indicates it did not pass. And I know Highline reran theirs and passed in a later November election. So this slide, again, has a lot of detail on it, but it basically shows not just school districts, but some city measures that were run in November and kind of their passage history and the percentage. So Auburn, Kent, Highline, and City Issaquah did not pass their bond, but other cities, Kenmore, Tukwila, Bothell, have all been successful. What's not listed on here is, you may recall, Harborview had a very successful bond measure passed in the presidential election, November 2020. Portland Public Schools also had a $1 billion bond measure on the November 2020 ballot, which passed in November. So some very successful large bonds passing in November. And then this slide shows, this is a slide running the capital levy. I didn't think I had this in here, but anyway, capital levy or bond with my expiring EPO. And so it basically, when you run multiple measures versus single measures, is what this slide is showing. And so when you run a single measure, if it's a capital projects, then 80% of them pass. If it's multiple projects, 90%, 95% pass. With bonds, 41%, and I don't know why that bar isn't all green. And then 50% pass 41% if it's a single run by itself, and then 50% passage when it's run in combination. Okay, and then I'll go back.
I know you didn't even mean to include this slide, so now I'm going to ask a question about it.
It's all right. I did mean to include it. It was just I couldn't find it in my own notes.
I just want to make sure I'm seeing this right.
Yep.
Multiple measures pass at a higher rate than when it's single measure?
Yes, that is
That
true.
is not what I would have expected from the data.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then the last, yes, it is my last slide, is just like Washington's passage rate history. And as John mentioned, we've passed one bond out of, our 2016 bond, and that was run as a single measure. That happened to be run in April of 2016 at that time. So, and then these next two slides are just there who, they work with multiple people and their disclaimers. And So just wanted to kind of, what considerations should be made relating to the timing of funding measures and kind of just get some feedback on that.
So one thing we've looked at before was the changing tax rate based on how we do this, and the timing. One of your slides had, I'm trying to remember where it was. 53. Thank you, Chris. Yep. I had a question on that slide. So that showed a increase. It showed a higher tax rate per 1,000 of AV starting in 2029. But I guess my question is, if the 2024 bond, if that, will that result in a higher,
Right.
Okay, so basically what I'm trying to get to is, I recall when we were looking at the table before, that there was a period of time within this where it went, it was going to go up and then back down. There was like this 2-year bubble.
Yeah.
Have we been able to address that, or?
There was, I know back in the fall, we looked at multiple scenarios, so you may be remembering a different scenario where we also looked at how, what does it take to get the money by 2031 versus 2034. This scenario assumes we receive all the funds by 2034 that we need to construct construction. So, and yes, there isn't a 2-year bump. This is a level. So at least in this scenario, running the 2024 bond does not cause a tax rate increase. It's when you come in and do the renewal of the construction levy that there's a small bump of 15
Okay,
cents per thousand.
Thank you, because I think what I'm probably remembering was the collecting of funds by 2031, not.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
yeah.
And obviously I'm assuming it's true to say that if we collect the funds sooner, we would be able to finish the projects sooner.
Correct.
Okay.
So yes, you could run higher amounts at a higher tax rate to collect the funds sooner, or.
Okay. Good. I think I may have even said this back then. This makes more sense to me.
When we're putting, I understand the reality of putting it at $1 million. I think that causes a lot of folks to gasp, that, oh, that can't be my house. They don't realize. Whoa.
You want to keep, okay.
No, I was
I
at
just
the
wasn't
same
sure if you
slide.
wanted to keep it on that slide or
Yeah.
we're talking the
Sorry about that.
timing. All right.
There we go. If we had, on that third column, it was actually a third and a fourth, where it was $500,000 or even 3/4. But the idea of being able to graduate it so people, because I don't think that a lot of folks, they realize their home value has gone up, but they don't want to think of it at that point, if you will, because all they're seeing is the $150, the $120. So if we had, first of all, graduated, whether it's half and 3/4 or half and 1 or 3/4 and 1, I think that would help. Second of all, one of the things that has been very successful for me in the past when I talked increases in costs for various projects, whether it's increases in insurance premiums, increases in doctor's fees, whatever, put it in relationship to something tangibly retail they can get their arms around. And I tried this during the last election, that extra $150 was basically one extra latte a month.
Yeah.
2 extra, one per week, a cup of coffee from Starbucks. And people can actually wrap their head around that as opposed to wrapping their head around, oh my God, it's $150.
So as we get closer to the actual 2024 informational campaign, then yes, we will look at different options for showing the value of the home. And just to address, we have to, PDC has certain rules, and we have to be careful about comparing increases to a cup of coffee or the price of a lunch or things like that. So we also have to make sure we're following rules when we talk about that. So,
I guess, yeah.
So I want to go back to unless there's other questions about the financing, I want to go back to kind of the question on the timing and what considerations. So Syria, were you first or was Chris first?
I was first, but I'd already gone, so, but that's fine.
Oh, Eric.
Go, Eric.
Was
Go,
first.
go, go.
I'm
Being so
sorry.
glib.
I was actually going to chime in on that, and Mark, to me, the more complicated you make this slide, the less information will get transmitted. And to me, most people are going to say, my house is worth more or less than $1 million. And then they're going to know that they're going to increase their taxes by more or less than, but somewhere around $100 to $150. So I hear your point, but that does get out further, and that's not today's conversation. Yeah.
Experience level of 40 years of public relations
Yeah.
experience versus 40 years of lab experience.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to tell you is that you can do that and still, while you don't have a complicated chart like most of the charts we have up here,
Yeah.
adding one more column isn't going to stupefy people.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's a conversation down the stream.
So to respond to the question at hand, I appreciate the information that was provided and sort of laying that out. It did appear that because 2024 would be a presidential election, and February still seemed to do better based on what was there in regards to the overall numbers. I mean, and what considerations do you give? I think this is such a the context in which we're going to be working in the political landscape in regards to a bond can change within the next 2 years as well. And I think we're going to have to be aware of that and what's happening with that. I also think assessed value and what happens with that within our community is also going to be something that can potentially impact timing of what we do and the bond, really, in some regards, depending if, I know we do a conservative AV value increase, which is great. It could potentially go up more than that, or it could potentially go the other direction. So it does provide some things that I think we have to think about in that timing phase from there. So I'm having a hard time, honestly, thinking of what exact considerations, besides it's that context is just so unknown. I do think the elections this fall of 2022, I know it's a mid-year, but I think that could give some insight if there's anything on there at that point in time and what's happening. I don't know. So I'm going to leave it. I apologize that it's not more insightful than that at all, but I do find that the turmoil is not necessarily the right word, but the fluxing of what's occurring right now makes it very difficult to be able to give really solid considerations.
Two considerations I have on timing are, one, which one's going to work, right? And then two, if it doesn't work, what optionality do we have? We've talked about before, if we try this bond, it does not achieve the 60% required, is there a fallback? Or at least maybe I've talked about this. I think we've all talked about it. And so the consideration is, okay, is there less optionality if we run it in November versus February? Does running in February provide us, one more layer of an option? I guess I don't know the answer to that. That's something I'd like to know. I've been skeptical about our ability to achieve 60% on this. I actually, after seeing after our most recent results in the climate we were in, the context we were in, and all of that, the capital levy achieved 59%. And so I'm
The technology
The
levy.
technology
the
levy.
technology levy received 59%.
that's what I meant to say. I don't know what happened there. Thank you. The technology levy achieved 59%. At any rate, that gives me, I'm less skeptical. I'm more hopeful. And having the long runway of being able to do a longer informational campaign, I'm feeling good. But I still have, I have that worry. Like my view is these schools, these projects need to be built. They need to be built as fast as soon as we can. While also not impacting the tax rate too much. I use the word impacting there, as Mark.
Don't you do that, I'll smack you.
Yeah. So I don't have any sense on February versus November in terms of whether it's more likely to pass. From the data I see, it's hard to tell. So the consideration for me would be if running it in February provides us with a more fallback options, then I would be more inclined to go that route than November.
I think Chris first. Did you
Yeah.
still have your?
Yeah, I've got mine up for, first I wanted to say thank you for providing the Davidson report, because there are things that my intuition matches it, and there are things where it tells me my intuition was wrong. And this is data, I like it. It does provide a lot of information in terms of running things together, multiple things on the same ballot versus, that means a lot. The presidential election, it's kind of like, well, it doesn't make all that much difference, which is kind of surprising to me, but it's data. I'm not going to argue with it. The question I have actually does come back to slide 53, which is if this passes, it doesn't cause a bump in the rate because something else is sunsetting, that you've managed to engineer this so that it's replacing something that's going away. And that cannot be emphasized enough, that this is keeping things stable, even though the bond is going to look like a big number on people's ballots. This is a longer-term loan, and it doesn't change your tax rate. The levies, which are shorter term, are the ones that are actually causing tax increases, but the bond is one that keeps things stable. And it has the big advantage, if I recall correctly, that it allows us to collect up front rather than having all these LGO stabilizing the flow problems that come from levies. So I'm hesitant, but I understand the advantages to this are huge. So I'm supportive.
And I just want to clarify when voters approve a bond, you're still, in order to structure your tax rate, you're still selling those bonds, usually a portion every year to keep that tax rate level. So you're not getting, if it's a $900 million bond, you're not selling $900 million the next day.
Yeah,
So,
but it's something
yeah.
where you don't have this challenge that we have with
Yep.
the levy, where you have a 50 million gap between when we need to build versus when we can collect. So anyway, thank you.
Okay.
Is there a difference between when we start collecting if we pass something in February versus if we pass it in November? Do we still collect the following January? Or is there a difference in terms of the funds coming in?
Yes, when you pass in November, you then can levy your debt service in the next fiscal year. So like in November 24, you would levy your debt service in 23. I gotta think about, actually, and then since it doesn't affect your debt service until till 25. So
Okay.
it's not, that's the other reason you're able to keep your tax rate level, but, so you don't have to, let me back up. Yeah, you do not have to worry so much about a November election and working directly with the county to make sure the tax is levied for that next year. If you pass a construction levy in November that you're intending to collect for 23, you have to work closely. 24, that you then, and you want to collect that in 25, you need to work closely with the King County Assessor's Office to make sure that once it passes, then they have the ability to turn that around and get that in the collection.
Okay.
Hope I didn't just confuse you.
You did not confuse me.
All right.
But I'm not totally understanding.
All right. Ask.
Let me see if
John
I
will
can.
simplify
No,
it.
but I don't know if I can because I'm
All
not, I'm fuzzy as well. So, let's say we, bond measure passes in '24, November of '24. When are we proposing to do our first bond sale? That's helpful
The
for
bond
me.
sale would be in the spring.
So spring of
So
'25.
you'd get your first kind of cash influx in spring of '25.
And so
And then-
when would taxes start to be collected to pay those bonds?
Yeah, so then when you do a bond sale of spring of '25, your first principal and interest payments are not due until, I just wanna make sure I got until the 26
Yeah, okay.
calendar year.
That makes sense.
So
Okay.
that's when you do a levy.
And does passing it in February of '24 change that at all? That timing?
So let me ask, if we pass it in '24, when would our first bond sale be?
February of '24?
Would still, if you pass it in November of '24.
No, if you pass it in February of '24.
February of '24, not February of '25. February of '24, then most likely our first bond sale would be in '24, and then, and then we'd have to,
Collect in '25.
probably, yes.
And so
We have
would-
to do a scenario based on that.
So the assumptions that are on slide 53 are a November election.
That is true.
Or no,
It's-
the assumption is a spring '25
Sale.
bond
Sale.
sale.
Yes.
Doesn't matter when you
Yeah.
pass it. You can hold and sell,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep, and the
Okay.
assumptions are an annual bond sale, 25, 26, 27, 28, and 29. So that's the kind of cadence of bond sales, so.
And so to maintain this profile of tax rate and implications, doesn't matter when we pass the bond, the sale will remain the same. If we want to increase the timeline for the sale, then that will potentially affect this if collection starts in '25.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm monopolizing, but I have one follow-up on this. There's a requirement for bond elections that not only will you achieve 60%, but there's a turnout requirement. Is that right?
Correct.
And that does not apply to levy funding measures, correct?
Correct.
And that turnout requirement is based on the turnout in the last prior presidential election, or the last November election.
So that's a consideration
It
in a
is.
sense, if you were to run in February 24.
Yeah.
A bond in February 24, your turnout would be based on November 23, which is not neither a mid-year or a presidential. If you were to run in February of 25, for example, that would probably not be wise because it's following a presidential election where there's a high turnout requirement.
Correct.
We have, though, I will say, we have not had any problems meeting our turnout requirements so far. So I'd have to analyze what a presidential, which would have been the 2020, but I still think we would have met our turnout requirement.
And I just want to make sure I have my head wrapped around this. That does not apply to levy measures, that turnout requirement.
That
So if
is
we were to
correct.
run a levy in February 25, that would not be the turnout requirement for November 24 would not, okay.
Can I maybe speak to something you just said? So one of your considerations was which option provides more fallback options? If we're looking to start projects in '25 and the fallback is a levy, then a November '24 bond measure does not provide any fallback for that because 5 collection begins January 26.
Yeah, thank you.
Two things. One, earlier you were talking about the nearly 60% with tech versus the construction levy at 50 plus, if you will. I think one of the considerations I don't think we can ever, in this market, in this high-tech section of Seattle even, which is a high-tech multiple area, But still, everyone has a high belief in tech. So I can see a tech levy never probably having a problem. A construction levy, yes. A bond, yes. So to read in those percentages into how will that translate into a bond, it's night and day. What it does tell me, though, is in order to pass a bond, it's not just the idea of how many dollars more will it cost me per month or year. It's a value proposition. And we need to start talking about our value proposition now, or last month, to be quite frank. It's almost too late already. We need to be talking about every time there is positive information coming out of this area, that we're not just putting it on our website, we're not just putting it on our Facebook. We've got to proactively go out there and push it, whether it's a news story, whether it's feature material, whatever. We have to go out and push that and push it hard. It's not the world of external communications is night and day from internal communications. And so we need to build into your budgeting an agency campaign, and a substantial one. And you don't go to Al's tree service and PR agency. You go to a Hill and Knowlton. You go to an Edelman or whatever, because that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. It's going to be more buck, and that value proposition has. I mean, case in point, the young lady that won the $250,000. That needed to have a push that meant a call to every news outlet in the market, and for that matter, even beyond the market, not just putting out the release. It's because the whole place is flooded with information, as we all know, and the only noise that gets made is the noise you push. So,
Mark, you, I think, covered the very last slide of the presentation, but we're past time for what we have budgeted, but I do want to make sure that we cover, everyone has a chance to talk to the considerations for the timing. So, Director Bluesner, do you have?
The only piece I would put, I know we speak a lot about maintaining tax rate and the levelness of it. I do believe this last election cycle, if I believe they actually did have quite an increase on there and was able to. So I think we need to also question our assumptions that we're at and have some conversation with that as well. That potentially a slightly larger bond that might increase could actually potentially have greater likelihood to pass at 60% than if we try to keep it at a certain rate. So I just wonder if we need to question some of our assumptions that we have. Again, because of context and because of the reality in which we're in. It could be, I've also heard that, the likelihood of even getting to 60% regardless, just due to the climate in which we're in, is just lower. So I think there's a lot of plays there that we have to pay attention to. I think that timing piece, I think building the soonest we can is really the component. We know the growth is coming. There's no reason for us to believe. We know the economics are showing that. We know the growth management plans are predicting that. We see it. So the sooner the better.
And I've just got an intersection between several things we've been discussing this weekend that I'm going to forget if I don't say it now. We have 29 elementary schools. Those 29 elementary schools do not include a single school that is named for a Native American. Our one Native American building that is Kamayakan, it's named for a chief down in the Yakima Valley. And in the research I've been doing, we have a very high-profile chief involved from the Snoqualmie in the signing of the Treaty of Point Elliott, Pat Kanim. So whenever the nominations for naming new buildings comes around for elementaries that we're building de novo, I would like to throw that name in the hat.
The last question I have on timing, Sorry, I should have been able to answer this myself, but I wasn't able to find it. The levies and the levy measures that we just passed, the technology levy and the EP&O levy, those will be back for renewal what year? They're 3 year, right? They're 4 year.
4 years.
Okay.
I mean, we could come back in 3 years.
We could, but,
Yeah.
but we're,
I
the
don't
plan,
think it's a
the
good
current, the
idea.
plan is to bring them back in 2026.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm just trying to think through myself. I can't really think of, to me, my thought is that the timing of, well, no matter when we run a bond in 2024, it's going to be a single issue. It will be the only thing we have on the ballot, right? Is that, I mean,
As of today, yes.
okay, thank you. That's the correct answer. Yeah, okay. And is there any, would running it in February, would successfully passing it in February or November have any implication on anything for the operations levy? Does the timing of,
The operations levies are assumed every 4 years.
Okay.
And so when you see a tax rate
that's a
change, it's assumed that it is ongoing.
Okay.
Rather than not present in future years.
Okay, no, that's helpful.
As of, again, we don't know what legislative changes could happen in the
Sure.
future, so anything's, yeah.
Okay, right, okay. I don't know.
All right, as Eric mentioned, there is one last slide, so that I just wanted to, we are working on a communication plan, not only for our current construction projects, as we have been doing, since 2016, but as our, build up to a potential 2024 bond. So we will be issuing an RFP for strategic consultants for the Building Excellence Program. In our capital projects department, we had a position, a communications position that was vacated this fall. The person resigned, and so we're going to be working with a contractor to, do project report updates to continue that work. And then we will continue to develop the strategy to engage our community in our projects and program. So those are the continued work to be done on that.
I'm going to say your second bullet point just a little bit differently. Our former communications professional in our communications department received a directorship in another school district. And so that's why she transitioned out of that
That's-
position.
Thank you, John. That was a much better way of saying it. So,
I am curious about a timeline for communication strategy, and
about what was
also
the first thing you
interested
said? The timeline.
the
Thank you.
timeline,
I didn't
and
hear
I'm
that.
also interested in knowing what we're planning on doing differently, considering our past success rate in passing bonds.
I think primary in that is seeking outside consultation and support for that strategy. So for me to articulate the differences in the strategy would just be my thinking. So I don't think that would be fruitful at this point, but that is truly why we're seeking outside support, because we have a communications department that has a full-time workload of everything, and they support our informational campaign as well in real time. So seeking outside consultation and support is going to help us to develop a plan that's different than what we've done in the past. Timeline, an RFP, typically you put requests for proposals out typically for about 4 to 6 weeks so that agencies and can provide that information to you. You go through a selection process. So I would say by the end of this school year, we'll have folks in place.
And as we mentioned too, Brian and his team, the capital projects team, will begin to work on kind of design, those design concepts, conceptual design, so that is something that will be different than what we had before.
A point, and I think maybe it's just semantics in the way you've laid it out here, But as you look at your communications strategic consulting, the campaign has to not be about buildings. It has to be about the value proposition of the education being delivered to their kids. Because their kids will sell the bond and the buildings won't. I think we have to really, yes, your informational campaign will be about, okay, if we have X number of buildings, we can have X number of students. But that strategic persuasion campaign really talks about the value proposition of what is my student getting out of this district? And what are graduates of this district bringing to the overall community? Because that transcends, it costs me $5 more a month, because you got to go for the heart. There's no saying that you enter the head through the heart. And because you sell the heart, the head will follow right behind.
And I was merely going to echo that a building excellence plan, lead with the excellence, and the buildings come later.
I guess, and this occurred to me, the last timing consideration thing I'm interested in is what is the timing of the informational campaign? And how does that look versus February versus November? Just sort of off the top of my head, I can think of, okay, potentially a benefit of November is we're really running a focused informational campaign never mind. No. I forgot when summer occurred. Well, anyway, but I was thinking about when we run the informational campaign versus when we know that our families are usually high propensity voters, and when they're in town. So anyway, the timing of the informational campaign vis-a-vis the election, I think is a consideration.
So if we run in February 24, we're 22 months out from an election. We know that a February election coincides with the informational campaign running kind of in the middle of the winter break. We just experienced that. It's difficult because folks really don't pay much attention before, and so then you kind of are starting it really in January, and people feel like that's too late. And so it's an odd time, to be honest with you. April, we're 24 months out. November, we're 31 months out.
The length of the runway, well, for me, is not really a concern. I mean, to me, there's enough runway for all of this.
Correct.
But it's really I guess I want to, if you could, at some point, we could bring us back just a slide of when the real focused part of, maybe this is not there is going to be a real focused part of the informational campaign. We will we will have an informational part starting immediately, but there will be a very focused time, and I kind of want to know the timing of that.
Right.
And I mean, it's typically, 3 to 4 months, prior to the election is the heavy focus. Obviously, there's a lot of work before that, but yeah.
We're 15 minutes over budget. Anything else for the good of the order? That was. Yes. So, yeah, we'll take a 15-minute break and come back at 11.
All right.
Okay. Next item is legislative update and budget outlook.
And so the final topic on our agenda for the extended study session is budget outlook, planning, legislative update. As you know, the 2022 legislative session concluded on March 10. With that, there are some budget implications as well as some other implications in terms of just overall legislation. And so Barbara has put together an update around the legislation and then dives into how that will impact our budget outlook, provide a brief glimpse of our projected budget outlook, knowing that we have further budget work to do this spring.
All right, thank you.
There usually are not a lot of changes in the second year of the biennium, and next year will be a full biennial budget. So the first area of priorities were what we considered urgent, and there were two areas: equitable COVID support, and then technology. And so, as a reminder, our district received a lot lower federal ESSER dollars than many of our other school districts that were similar in size. And so, unfortunately, the legislative session did not result in any additional ESSER funding to assist with this. So all of our ESSER funds will be used in the 21-22 school year, and those expenditures related to those ESSER funds will sunset. However, the legislature did provide some partial enrollment stabilization funding that will receive this fiscal year in the 21-22 school year. To stabilize, they're giving us 50% of the enrollment loss between 21-22 and 19-20. The legislature also did provide a small increase in funding for technology through what we call MSOC funding. That's materials, supplies, and operating costs. That was actually not new this legislative session. They provided it in the second year of the biennial budget, so we knew this was coming. So it's about $25 per pupil, or $750,000. And as a reminder, we're spending over $25 million a year on technology in both the general fund and the capital fund, and the state gives us about $4 million a year. So this $750,000, while appreciated, will be just going to offset those local costs because they're severely underfunded. So just some bills related to academic success and holding us harmless. As I mentioned, the 50% stabilization, that bill 5563 did pass. The ESSER budget provision failed, unfortunately, so we did not receive any additional ESSER funds. There was also a budget bill out there to reimburse school districts for the actual costs of transportation for homeless, special ed, and foster students, McKinney-Vento costs. That bill did not pass. However, they did put a small amount of money in there as a safety net, so districts can apply if they have higher costs in transportation that they're being funded for. The challenge is, in talking with my colleagues, Seattle School District said they alone could eat up that whole amount that the legislature provided just with their costs alone. So the amount the legislature provided won't be sufficient to cover the whole state. So more to come on that. The short-term priorities that were identified was to continue looking at special education and fully fund the cost of special education. We fund almost $19 million out of our local levy, and so no changes were made in special ed allocations during the supplemental budget. They did, the other short-term request that we had was to provide additional funding for social-emotional learning, and the legislature did provide additional supports for social-emotional learning. They increased the prototypical staffing allocation for what they define as physical, social, and emotional support staff. It is phased in over 3 years. So we'll get the first of that 3-year phase in the 22-23 school year. There is a compliance requirement, and I have another slide on this that I'll go into more detail. We already fund a significantly more FTE, and we currently will meet the anticipated compliance requirements even 3 years out. So SEL remains underfunded by the state. I'll just show this slide. So this is something we showed in the fall when we were developing the legislative platform. So it's just a reminder that we spend right now about $21 million on social and emotional support staff. And again, this includes counselors, nurses, psychologists, mental health, staff and student safety, such as campus security, family engagement coordinators. So we are spending $21 million, and currently the state is funding that 8.3, the blue box. And then on an FTE basis, the state is funding 78 FTE, and we are hiring 183 FTE right now. So when the state, so the additional funding that the state provided for 22-23 will give us another, on the left, about another $3.8 million. So it will bring that blue box kind of up to that new line. And then on the FTE side, it will increase slightly the FTE the state is funding. Again, we are still spending beyond that. And then the 24-25 potential funding levels, again, those have to be approved in the next biennial budget, will bring the state funding up to the next blue line and the FTE up to the next blue line. Now, of course, the costs will continue to increase due to inflation. But so as a reminder, so we need to continue to balance how we kind of spend our state and local dollars. That will be important, because for every new state dollar we spend on state-provided FTE, then we have to find additional levy funds to support that, because the state does not provide sufficient costs to cover the full cost of a staff member. So. So the total FTE, that's to be determined. And John, yeah, that's to be determined.
So currently with that, we meet the compliance requirements for the funding with what we currently have.
Yeah, so we are meeting the compliance requirements that the state will be setting out. We don't have the full rules yet. I think we will have those at the end of the month or early April. The state is still working on the compliance rules.
I think what we do with this also has to be in concert with what we do with our long-term budget, knowing that the state has already kind of indicated what the 3-year plan will be. We already exceed the 3-year plan in terms of our local staffing levels, and we have an opportunity to meet some needs and goals that we have as a district. So it's balancing both of those things, understanding the long-term budget implications, utilizing, a new revenue stream to be very strategic. And so, but what that FTE add, which positions, that's to be decided.
And as this is a change to the prototypical school model, it is an ongoing revenue stream, not a one-time.
Correct. And then, so, what's for sure is 22-23 funding. And then, tell me if I'm correct, but I believe in the 23 legislative session, the legislature and governor will need to agree on a budget that continues to fund these as priorities.
Yeah, so that's why I use the term potential, because we won't know until they pass the next budget cycle, the next budget. Okay, so then just some bills around well-being. The specific bills was Senate Bill 5595 and House Bill 1664. That's the bill that changed the prototypical funding model and had that 3-year phase-in that passed. There was also a bill related to paraeducator training, and I'll talk more about this later. This bill did not pass. It changed the timing on when paraeducators need to be trained. However, the legislature did pass funded additional days of training. So there's more information needed on this. We testified against this paraeducator training bill due to the timing issues and the delivery method. They were had very restrictive requirements on timing and delivery method, and we want to make sure that districts have the flexibility around what's best for each district on when and how to deliver that training. So those are bills related to that. The other, continuing on the short term, is the SEB. We also asked to continue to fully fund the cost of SEB, which is the State Employee Benefits Board, and there were no changes in the prototypical model. Again, because right now, the state only funds the prototypical model portion of the SEB, and they mandate additional that substitutes and other employees are covered by SEB, but they do not fund us for those employees. So again, nothing changed on that. Attract, recruit, and retain diverse staff. No changes to certification systems in this legislative session. However, the legislature, keeping with the attract, recruit, and retain, they did fund a 5.5% inflationary adjustment, IPD or COLA. And again, that funding is only provided to the prototypical model. Whenever there's a state IPD, for every 1%, then that requires the district to find another $1 million plus in local funding. And then same, they're increasing the SEP premium increase, and while they fund the state portion of that increase, it requires local investment as well. And then the third category, the long-term, was requesting additional updates related to construction, requesting an update to the state formula for school construction assistance. No change to that 1979 standard formula. So construction still remains underfunded by the state. We requested simple majority for school bonds, and while there was a bill and some conversations around simple majority, it did not move out of the legislative session at this time. So no change on that, and then no change to sales tax. School districts still have to provide sales tax on construction projects, which is a large impact in this state. So some specific bills related to construction, one of which passed, 3 have failed. There was, again, as I mentioned, the resolution to change the bond passage requirement that did not move out of session. Brian was working with the coalition on the next 3 bills related to House Bill 1280, which did pass, is a greenhouse gas emissions reduction bill. It requires agencies to analyze life cycle costs and include provisions in design for all electric energy systems as an alternative. Just at least you have to look at them as an alternative. It doesn't mean you actually have to build the final building that way, but you need to at least analyze those costs. House Bill 1770, which would have put in new requirements for energy codes and had some significant cost impacts to us, did not pass. And then Senate Bill 5202 created a depreciation fund within the general fund for preventative maintenance, and that failed. We testified against that bill as well, just because we didn't need it created additional accounting requirements that we didn't think was necessary.
Sorry, just a clarification. When
Yeah.
you say pass for House Bill 1280, that passed the House, is there a Senate bill?
The bill number that I've listed there is kind of the
Yeah.
original bill, but
Okay,
it
so this has gone
passed
through-
out of both sides.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, and then the next 2 slides relate to, we were watching bills that could have put unfunded mandates on us as school districts across the state, and the majority of those bills failed, but there were still some bills that passed, some good, and some will provide unfunded mandates. So again, the first one would have expanded eligibility for unemployment insurance. So that did not go through. The next bill, House Bill 1732, was the long-term care program that would have implemented a new payroll tax on all employees in Washington State. That bill passed, and it delayed those payroll deductions until July of '23. Bill 1807 was about civics education. It mandated a year-long course that did not go through. And then there was a bill that was about vacation leave, mainly focused on state employees, but it also would have removed the limit on sick leave cash out at retirement for school district staff. And so that bill did not pass. And again, that would have had additional significant costs on school districts. So then the next three, the prejudgment interest bill, Senate Bill 5155, would have required public agencies, if losing a lawsuit, that interest on the judgment began to run on the date the judgment was issued. And that would have had, again, a significant cost to our insurance costs, and our risk management pool worked closely on this bill. And so that did not make it out of the legislature. Then the next bill, 5326, was requiring contractors to have the same state benefits, benefits and retirement plans as state employees. So that bill did not pass. And then the last bill that did pass, 5649, had a small expansion of leaves for the Washington State Paid Family Medical Leave. And as we've shared before, the program was predicted to be insolvent in the next few months. The legislature had to infuse more money into the Paid Family Medical Leave program. And so we were concerned with anything that then continued to expand eligibility. It doesn't make sense to do that when they don't have enough money. So that's the summary of high-level legislative impacts. And then I'm going to move into the budget.
Mark might have a question.
Mark has a question. Okay.
Yeah, real quick question on 5649, the increased eligibility for certain types of leave. Could you give us, for instance?
I believe what actually changed is if you are caring for a family member, and that family member then passes away, it actually gives you bereavement leave. So that's the expansion that they made. Yeah. So. Okay. All right, so moving into the budget outlook and assumptions, and I want to focus on kind of this year, what does 21-22 look like? But just to start with, I want to kind of remind kind of what our long-term picture is. And this is a chart that shows kind of our past revenue. The blue line is revenue, the green line is expenditures. And after McCleary, we purposely built up our fund balance until we kind of knew what the impact of McCleary would be. And so you can see in 18-19 and 19-20, our revenues were actually higher than our expenditures. Last year, they were right on our revenues and expenditures. And then this year, because of the higher fund balance, we purposely put a budget together to spend down some of our fund balance. And so we budgeted for our expenditures to exceed our revenue. And then we also know going forward, state funding continues to not keep up with the required costs. And so you can see going forward that revenues are less than our expenditures. So we have a negative fiscal gap going forward. And again, I'll get into more details on that.
Just quickly, this includes the levy that just passed. That's incorporated into the graph. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes. So just to break out, just a reminder of what fund balance means. What is fund balance? Fund balance is kind of like our cash in the bank. It's what you have currently in the bank. It encompasses required reserves that you need for emergencies. It also encompasses things that you carry over and reserve for the next year, such as grants, you know, we have building budgets, things that can only, and fund balance can only be spent once. Once it's gone, it's no longer available. So it's different than kind of look our revenues versus expenditures. It's really that beginning and ending cash that we have. So I just want to remind, this is just a reminder that our 21-22 budget assumptions, that we estimated that we would begin the school year at, or we did begin the school year at 107. We'll start with the bottom, that total there. We budgeted about 101.3 million. So the 107 million is made up of 5 different categories. The board has a minimum fund balance requirement, which is about 5% of our revenues of the prior year. So that's 23 million is a minimum fund balance requirement. Then each year we look at what needs to be reserved related to carryover. So we have grants that encompass multi-years, and so those have to be carried over and reserved. We have programs such as our skills center that have to be reserved for that specific program. We have our building budgets. They are allowed to carry over their building budgets, and so that is made up of that in that 14.1. The 4.1 million we have. That is for inventory and prepaid items, and so that's a portion of that is for inventory at hand, and this is an accounting requirement. So it's inventory on hand at the end of the fiscal year that you can't spend, and so we're required to reserve that. And then the other portion is for accounts payable, bills that were prepaid, kind of like a bill that was prepaid in the summer, but it really relates to the beginning of the fiscal year. So we're required to reserve that as part of our fund balance, and then that gets then recorded as an expenditure during the fiscal year. We also, through conversations with the board, set aside $40 million due to COVID and due to the unknown impact of enrollment and the pandemic costs. And then we had a balance of $25 million in unassigned. So that's the makeup of the $107 million in fund balance. We're estimating, as I mentioned, we are planning on spending down some of that fund balance. And so this is, the last column there is just an estimate of kind of where those categories will be at the end of the year. But we're estimating around $70 million to end this school year in fund balance. And we were budgeting about 76 million. So that's just a breakout of fund balance, and we'll keep going. And so just our assumptions related to our budget outlook on the left is kind of what we originally thought in June. We plan to use $25 million in fund balance. What's actually happening is we're still planning on using that $25 million in fund balance. We planned on no mid-year state legislative funding changes. We did receive $5 million in enrollment stabilization funds. The legislature we believe will get that allocated in probably July. We originally assumed pandemic costs of $4.1 million, and if you remember, we were going to spend our ESSER funds over 2 years. Our pandemic costs are actually running around $17 million, and so that's going to require additional use of fund balance. We assume no additional relief for COVID impacts, and we did not receive the ESSER funds. However, we did receive a $1 million grant from the Department of Health to support our pandemic costs. So we estimated our ending fund balance at 76. We're right now estimating our fund balance around 70, though that's a conservative number, meaning we know when we do our mid-year kind of review and we're still finalizing that, we estimate that all buildings will spend their budgets, all departments will spend their budgets. We know we typically spend less than we estimate, and so we'll have required committed carryover. So that 70 million may, increase by, 1 to 2%, $5 to $10 million. So just a reminder that our budget is comprised, the majority of our budget is committed to staff salaries and benefits. So making a change within the budget it's hard to make a large-scale change within the budget that doesn't impact staff salaries and benefits. The remainder of the budget is for supplies and materials, purchase services, contractual items, and a small amount for travel and capital outlay that we haven't. Mark?
Quick question, and maybe it's on a subsequent slide. The staff salaries and benefits, how does that break out as far as administrative versus teaching versus whatever?
I don't have that pie chart in this presentation. We do have it in our budget document, but we have the pie, we
Do you
can
have
get that pie
do you have a
chart.
feel for it? You could actually just kind
That's
of,
about, it's 76 to 80% on teaching, and the rest is
fine.
maintenance and.
no, I didn't need
Yeah.
a real pie. I just,
Yeah.
you give me a feel for it. Okay, thanks.
All right, so, so this was our original four-year outlook. So each year, when the board adopts the budget, we provide you a budget presentation in June, and this is our original outlook through each column, as a remember, and we've updated these estimates with our preliminary mid-year projections, and we'll continue to update it. And then the data to the right is pre-legislative changes. So this is why I'm using the term original. So this is before the legislative changes. So I'll jump to, so the 21-22 budget column, and then there's the 21-22 estimated column. So I've already kind of talked through the beginning fund balance and our ending fund balance estimates. And so you can see the revenue changes and the expenditure changes, and I'll talk more about the differences between our actual and budget. But then going forward from 22-23, as we spend that fund balance down, we still, inconsistent with that line item, you'll see the 511 million in expenditures, the 522, the 536. All of those expenditures exceed our revenues, but they don't exceed our total resources. So we are using our current fund balance and spending that down. But you'll see in the last year, in the 24-25 school year, you can see that our ending fund balance with no changes would be $18 million, and that's below our required reserve. So at some point, we're going to have to bring our expenditures back in line with our revenues so that we can maintain our minimum reserves. But I want to also, I'm going to show you the same table with the legislative changes in it, so you'll see how that changes. But the one thing that I wanted to mention for this year, as you can see, our current estimated expenditures are exceeding our budgeted expenditures, and that's mainly because of the pandemic costs that we talked about. We also have received some additional grants that require us to spend money in the general fund, but we're going to receive revenue for those, and it's actually a transfer from the technology, the capital fund, and we'll get you. We haven't actually shared the details of. We'll share that in board briefs this week. We're receiving $3.4 million in new funding to support our technology costs. So it will offset our tech levy expenditures. So that's an impact of into our general fund. So we're going to be coming to the board in probably May or early June with a budget extension, which just requests authorization to change the budget level. And again, we have the funds to do that. So so that'll be coming to you. I think we did that 2 years ago with the board as well in the general fund. So. Okay, so
Question?
Yeah.
These budget assumptions and the estimates, this includes budget for the Emerson School, for the Emerson daycare? We're not cutting that out.
So the Emerson Daycare is the proposal is a self-funded program, and so that will come to the board in, the next month or two around the fees associated with that. So this doesn't speak to the Emerson daycare.
Okay.
Because this was the original budget.
So if self-funding doesn't happen, then it goes away?
Say that again?
So if self-funding doesn't come in, then it goes away?
So with all of our self-funded programs, it's finding, we also believe that there's interest. And so I think what we heard from our community is that
Yeah.
there's interest. And through their proposal of a self-funded program,
Okay.
they kind of mapped out some of those dollars. We're working on the dollars and cents, and that's, based on that, we'll bring a proposal around a fee increase.
Okay, thank you.
So just to, again, these were our original assumptions for the four-year budget outlook, and then we'll get into the legislative changes and how those assumptions have changed. But that four-year outlook that I just showed you was based on an inflationary adjustment for 22-23 of 1.6% and then 2% going forward. It estimated a slight benefit increase, no pension changes. It didn't have assumed no legislative budget changes. It assumed no additional ESSER funds, and it assumed pandemic costs and support sunset. It also assumes that our enrollment increase is fairly flat. Again, we do that in the budget, so we're conservative as far as our revenues. So about 150 FTE from current budget, and it assumed the EP&O levy passed and is increased. So then I want to bring you to what's happening for 22-23 based on the legislative changes. So we talked about, we are getting in 21-22 the $5 million in enrollment stabilization. That'll be used to support current pandemic costs and the shortfall that's there. We did not receive any additional ESSER relief. So this chart shows all the impacts, the anticipated budget changes for 22-23 due to the legislative impacts. So as I mentioned, the inflationary adjustment is 5.5% for 22-23 that the legislature provided. And so while that will infuse additional revenues into the system, because the state will fund this additional 5.5% increase, it's about 14 million, we are actually required to spend 19 to 20 million, 5.6 million, 6 million beyond that money, because we fund positions that the state doesn't provide. And so each 1% costs us about $1 million. So the net impact on our budget is really a net decrease of $6 million. The SEB, there's a 6% increase in SEB costs. Again, the state gives us funding, but we're required to spend slightly more than what the state gives us, so that's about a $200,000 impact. The prototypical staffing allocation that I shared with you is additional funds of $3.8 million. And then when there's inflation, they also provide an update to our non-salary allocation, our materials, supplies, and operating costs. So we're getting 5.5% there, plus that $25 in technology that I shared with you. That's about $3.3 million for us. Our paraeducator training, I mentioned the legislature provided funding for an additional 2 days of training in first year. We are still trying to determine, is that a requirement? Is that optional? Right now, even with the 2 days of training that they're funding, our costs to support that training far exceed what the state is reimbursing us for. So if we are required to do 2 additional days, we most likely will have local costs that we have to infuse in order to provide those 4 days of training. But again, that's still TBD. So So the impact right now that we're estimating is around 1.3 to 1.7 million dollars in net benefit due to the legislative changes. And and what you're going to hear is there's all this money infused into K-12. The reality is we're also required to spend dollars, and so okay. So let's see, then this, and in addition, we have, as we do every year, we've got to look at what the district impacts are. So we have contracts open with multiple groups. We have 3 classified groups and handbooks. And then we also need to make sure our staffing is aligned with our enrollment. We were overstaffed this year due to typical levels because of the online school and all the change that happened in the last 2 weeks of August. And so we need to realign our staffing. And I've talked about the local cost needs over state funding. We also will have ongoing fixed cost increases every year, utilities increases, insurance increases. Talking about enrollment projections, one of the things, our kindergarten registrations are down slightly from the year before. And so we're doing extra communication to make sure we get the word out to our families of how important it is for them to tell us now if they've got a kindergartner coming so we can plan appropriately for staffing. So we're going to continue to monitor our registrations. We should have our registrations for elementary and secondary, our initial registrations in by the end of the month. So this is an updated 4-year outlook with those legislative changes that I mentioned. So the 21-22 budget column and the 21-22 estimated column, those haven't changed, but you can just see the other columns. The revenue is higher than originally planned. Expenditures are also higher based on the required costs, but the fund balance is slightly higher due to those legislative changes. So just a reminder, long-term, and this assumes, if we provide, no significant new expenditures, or we balance those new expenditures with other changes in the budget. And so just a reminder, we'll need to do a budget extension for this year, and, fund balance, we're still monitoring where our fund balance could be depending on the impacts, final impacts for this year.
I think this is a good demonstration, and tell me if my assumption is wrong about the 24-25 ending fund balance being 25.6. This doesn't account for any increased staffing levels in the new dollars we are receiving from the state for the social, physical, emotional health. So really the increase in the prototypical funding model. So that's the challenge we face is this just meets our required ending fund balance, yet we're receiving an infusion of a significant chunk of dollars that really I feel compelled to respond to, yet any response to those dollars, adding additional positions means we're going to have to, everything's a balance scale as we move ahead, because we no longer have the fund balance to be able to live beyond our means. And so that's going to be, all of our work is to do those right sizing of budgets over time so that we can fund our priorities.
And following up on that, so the glide path coming into 24-25, 25-26 will be starting with exactly what we specify as a 5%. And so we're trying to hit a soft landing, admittedly with a lot of assumptions, but are the assumptions for the 23-24, those years, baking in the negotiations? Because I know we have open contracts that are negotiated in between there, or are they just extrapolating from the ones we've got?
So there's considerations in the budget And so I think there's further conversation to be had around that.
Next year is when I'll be very interested in that last number.
For the 23, 24, 24, 25 years, are we looking at the same projected 1.6% inflationary adjustment? Or are we changing that considering the discrepancy between the 5.5 that came?
That's a good question.
Our
So the
1.6.
numbers, and the 1.6 was for 22, 23, that was our estimate, and then beyond, it was 2% beyond that. So this update assumes a 5.5% in 22, 23, and then beyond that, it goes back to the estimated two. I think right now, the OSPI puts estimates for the future. They tell districts what they think it's gonna be, and it's in the 2% to 2.1% range. And so you're right, if they then all of a sudden say, oh, it's not, it's gonna be much higher than that, that is not built into here. But we have built in a 2 to 2.1% increase in the future.
And so how could our estimate be so off an IPD of 1.6 to 5.5? That's a question that I'm sure is in the room. That is the actual number that the current biennial budget funded for the 22-23 school year. So when we say it's an estimate based on, that's what the legislature communicated to school districts that they would be funding. And then in this short session, which they typically don't do this level of budget work, they determined to increase that due to current conditions. So it saying that we estimated it
Yeah,
makes it
you're
sound
right.
like it was something that we did. It's the number that was communicated to school districts around what actual would be for 22, 23, and then it changed.
And that is the same with the 2% going forward. Those are figures the OSPI, the state is providing us. So we aren't estimating those numbers. The OSPI is providing that to us.
Do we ever take the initiative to estimate a different number by chance?
This is what happened. This biennial budget has not happened. I've been doing this for 30 years, and this is the first time it's been that significant.
Okay.
There's additional detail around IPD and how we can, on an ongoing basis, fund it within our budget, because it is an increase every year. Generally, the way we're able to fund the cost beyond what is funded by the state is because our levy also increases essentially on an inflationary adjustment that's similar to what IPD is. And so it typically isn't a budget impact. This was much different. So, well, I'm assuming OSPI does additional work around IPD and would communicate something different to it. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah, if something should change, I mean, again, they're updating their estimates on a quarterly basis, and they continue to update them. So, if all of a sudden that 2% becomes a different number, they're gonna update us on that, and then we change our assumptions. So, I just have I think I have one more slide just to say kind of what are the next steps. Oh, sorry, so we're gonna continue monitoring our revenues and expenditures. We're finalizing kind of our mid-year review to see if there's anything, unexpected or, that will impact kind of our ending fund balance estimates. And then we're right now planning for next year. We've looked at the legislative impacts, but we still have questions. OSPI is getting us more information at the end of this month. We're gonna finalize our enrollment assumptions. As I mentioned, we'll get some registrations at the end of March. We're doing additional communication with our kindergarten families, our future kindergarten families, to ask them to register. And then we want to bring our staff back in alignment with our enrollment, and we're going to continue to align our expenditures with the resources we have, which includes our fund balance. So that is
When you said that you're going to realign staffing back to our enrollment,
Enrollment, right.
is that looking at less staff, more staff? What are we looking at?
So there's a long answer to that question. So right now, if we just take elementary, currently we are overstaffed in elementary because the last 2 weeks in August, we had an increase of almost 800 elementary students in our online. And so rather than redoing staffing across the district, we essentially added 30 to 40 staff. But that's not sustainable over time. And so we're going to have to right-size that staffing level. Now, what we also know is on an annual basis, we receive between 50 and 75 resignations or retirements at the elementary level. And so it isn't about needing to, remove staff. There's a natural attrition that occurs within. And so it's not backfilling those 30 to 40 positions. It's getting our, staffing back in alignment with enrollment, which is a typical process, and we have capacity to do that because of the typical turnover.
There we go. Despite all the hoopla over people pulling kids out of school during the pandemic, our enrollment really did not take the kind of hit that most districts did. In fact, if I recall, we finally got back to about normal, if I recall.
Yeah, we've almost, we're not quite to where we were in the 2019, 2020 school year, but yeah, we saw one of the smallest enrollment declines in King County during the pandemic.
And we had a decline of,
We're down about 500 from.
we were down
pre-pandemic.
5, now we're back up to the, within, you said we were down 500 at one point, or are we still down at the 500 level?
We were,
I
It was
believe
level,
we were
yeah.
down almost 1,000
Oh, okay.
at one
from our
point.
Thank you.
projection.
Thank you.
Okay.
The challenge, Mark,
Yeah.
is it's down, we were down a greater number from what we projected. We projected growth.
Uh-huh.
So we projected growth, we were
Okay.
down from that growth, but when you compare it to the where we were actually,
Right.
it's about 500. But yes, from what we thought we were gonna grow, we were down more than that.
But now that we're looking at the growth pattern anyway in the three communities plus the unincorporated area, that will probably disappear quickly, I would assume.
We believe so. Yeah. And with, kindergarten enrollment coming in and all of our families that are excited to enroll their kids in kindergarten.
Hurry up, Eric, get that kid enrolled.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so thanks for the legislative update. That was helpful to get that sort of breakout of everything that was going on and the different impacts. So as you look at that fund balance, just as in that slide prior, you note that the ending fund balance is decreasing at a greater rate each year, right? It's 8 million from 2022 to 2023, then it's 15 million in the following. So as we go forward in developing this budget, that to me is highly concerning. Because that's showing an increased deficit going on, and that needs to shift as we go forward with that budget piece. So I'm assuming these do not take into account the realignment of staffing that you're speaking to, or does this?
This does takes all of those assumptions into account. So there is much budget work to be done.
So there's additional effort in which to be able to align it. The other piece, and I don't know enough about this piece, I know we have a 5% is how we set. How does that place now? Is 5% still considered a reasonable reserve, or should it be 8% at this point in time? As we look at potential variants coming through and different things or that could impact it, are we better off having a higher reserve fund mandate or not? And I would be interested in being able to explore that some, just to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible as we have a larger budget and that component and potential for we have been able to fund a lot of what we did, the online school, because we did have reserves and the capacity to do so. So I just want to make sure we're making the right decision now that that 5% still holds.
Great. Chris?
So I think we're winding down on important topics, and I just wanted to point something out that new eyes help us notice. Could you flip back, let's see, 2 slides, slide 24. It turns out that for those, part of the reason that Siri and I, with eyes that need more thicker glasses, like to have it in front of us, is trying to read it off there becomes challenging. But it becomes challenging for anyone if the moment you drop below 18 point. So if you look at your second to bottom bar there where it says from 2 to 4 days, you can read it on your screen. Now turn around and try and read it up there. Our projector, it's to the point where the pixels on the A and the S are such that it's hard to read it, period. I just wanted to point that out as
I'm doing pretty good.
I've never noticed that before because I don't look at that thing very often. But she's right. So anyway.
Following up on Director Bleasner's question about the fund balance. So that's baked into our OE5 policy. Is there a statutory regulatory overlay that requires districts to either have policy on a fund balance percentage or specify what that is? And I will represent that based on my Google search, I can find them.
Yeah, I am not aware of a requirement.
Yeah, okay. So I agree with Director Bleasner. I think as a board, I think we have this policy. We haven't really had to think about it in a while, since I've been on the board. And I think as a board, we need to put some thought to that.
And on my quick Google search, it seemed like GAAP, which are the accounting, I remember just sitting through those audit meetings that we do utilize, if I remember correctly. They do speak about that reserve and sort of some of the policies you should also have in place around those. And I'm not sure we do, honestly, so completely. Such if you go down below them, how do you replenish them? If you have too much, what do you do with that? So sort of some of those other pieces, but.
And I know some of the other, states or different jurisdictions may have higher fund balance requirements because they're also responsible for pension liabilities and things like that. So every state and jurisdiction is different as well.
I'd just like to confirm that we've made an educated decision on that as opposed to just let history hold.
Agreed. So,
And it's not like we need to do that for this budget. It's just that we need to have that conversation before we adopt the next budget would be the.
correct. I think that I just wanted to,
Yeah.
I think that's a good
Okay.
issue to flag, and it's something that we, in the next, we should start
Cycle.
thinking about now.
Yeah.
How much of the fund balance did we use for the online school program?
So,
Ballpark.
yeah, no, I'm just trying to think. We were about 30 overstaffed, so it's about plus all the administrative support, so.
Secretarial.
5+ million.
Okay.
Dollars well spent.
Yeah.
To that point, with the number of students who may be continuing with either family or themselves in compromised situation, how much of a continuation of that online school program can or will we be continuing?
Yeah, we're going through that process right now to see if we're able to maintain that program, doing outreach to families to make sure that if we do have a program in place, we actually have students that align with staffing.
Yeah.
But we're separating out elementary from secondary in our
Right.
evaluation.
Good.
So Dale and team are in the works right now looking at all of that. Staff have already started reaching out to families so we can get some more solid numbers so that a decision is made earlier in the spring rather than waiting until August, because that was difficult overall.
Sure. And if the determination is made that the numbers are not sufficient for an overall program, we are planning contingency plans for those students who fall still into that category?
Will you define contingency plans? Because the providing an online school is one option. We don't, and if we can't run an online school, we don't have another online option for them. So we would need to work with those families individually to determine what that means for their student or their families.
All right.
So Noe, you're looking at sort of how do you right-size those expenditure components? What's sort of the timeline as to when, as a board, we'll be seeing that information coming back and having those discussions in regards to that?
I think it's really over the next few years. I don't think it's just this year. It's through evaluation, program evaluation, understanding. If we just take the additional prototypical staffing dollars, if we want to use those to fund additional positions, then that causes, more shifts in budget, reductions in budget elsewhere.
So I would be interested in knowing what would be expected for this year, and then in the next year, and then the third year, and sort of have that as we go to and looking at that budget, because that is sort of a component of thinking through in that long-term component. And also can drive how we hold conversations with the legislature as well. So I think those are some of the pieces that are valuable.
Yeah, and there's considerations to make for doing cuts immediately versus waiting a couple of years, because waiting a couple of years will give us a better picture for what the future looks like. How does enrollment bounce back? What has the legislature done? So there's things that will occur in the next couple of years that are just unknowns right now.
Absolutely, and we've worked in this world quite a bit in the sense that we've done unknowns, but usually we work through the planning process and figuring out what's our best assumption that we make in order to be able to best serve our students and community in that time frame and still maintain stability.
Correct.
So I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to say we're just going to put it off for 2 years. I would like to know what we plan to do in 2 years that would make that change. Because I think that's a piece we need to be holding that discussion, because it takes time for those things to go through.
I have on my work plan, I'm looking at an old work plan. I have on my work plan for prior year that at least this last year we had additional budget planning and process in the late May, early June study sessions. That's still the expectation for this year? Okay. Okay. Great. We are 2 minutes past ending time. Anyone else with anything for the good of the order? No? Okay. Okay, the board will meet later again this month on March 28, a study session at 5 p.m. here at the Resource Center, followed by a board meeting at 7 p.m. also here at the Resource Center. And then we have a meeting set for April 18, study session at 5, board meeting at 7. If there are no other agenda items, the study session is adjourned.